This is the Government Transition Advisory Committee. Today is Tuesday, July 18th, and we will be here from 6 to 8 p.m. Committee members and community members listening in, welcome to the 7th meeting of the Government Transition Advisory Committee. My name is Julia Meyer. We're done?
I know. I'm trying to fix.
How about now? Great. Sorry about that. My name is Julia Meyer. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Engagement and Community Participation Manager for the transition. Our co-chairs, David and Lori, will be facilitating tonight's meeting. Next slide, please. I'm just going to take a moment to go over some Zoom logistics before we get started. This is a hybrid meeting. This meeting is being recorded for later viewing. A copy of the recording will be posted on the city's transition webpage under past meetings and events. For today's meeting, we have closed captioning, American Sign Language, and Spanish interpretation available. To access Spanish interpretation, please click on the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and select Spanish. To access closed captioning, click on the CC button on the bottom of your screen. Committee members, please change your chat settings to everyone so that folks listening today can follow along. Please remember that the meeting chat is part of the public record. Community members listening in, we have the Zoom Q&A feature available tonight. You can submit questions or comments through the Q&A function. We may not be able to answer them during the meeting, but they also become part of the public record. At today's meeting, we do have some time held for verbal public comment, but as a reminder, folks can submit written public comment at any time using our comment form online through the transition website or by emailing transition@portlandoregon.gov. I just want to remind folks, there are challenges and opportunities of hybrid meetings. I participated in one of our meetings thus far virtually, and it was really, really hard to hear folks in the room when multiple people were talking or you were having conversations outside of the group conversation. I know it can be tempting to lean over and say something to your neighbor, but please try to not speak unless a co-chair calls on you and you raise your Zoom hand. With that, I'm going to pass it to David to review tonight's agenda. If you go to the next slide.
All right. Good evening, everyone. We will spend the first 10 minutes on committee business, including previewing the next co-chair rotation. After that, we will move directly into public comment. And after public comment, we'll receive a training from
Maya Hayam
from the city attorney's office on what is meant to be a public official and public meeting law. Then we will continue the conversation from last week about the role of the committee. Haley from the mayor's office will join us for that conversation, followed by reviewing and providing input on the transition monthly status report. But before we adjourn our meeting today, we will close with a brief review of our next steps. Next slide, please. So before we begin our regular committee business, I want to announce that Terrence has resigned due to scheduling conflicts. However, the good news is Jose has become a full committee member. So we haven't had any excused absences tonight, and at our next full committee meeting is on August 14th. We will appoint our next rotation of co-chairs. The co-chairs will serve from September to November of 2023. Laura and I will help onboard the new co-chairs from their mid-August appointments to their first chairing meeting on September 6th. Next slide, please. Here. As a reminder, the responsibilities of the co-chairs are in our bylaws. I'm one of the one of the things that I've experienced in this position is learning to navigate various different opinions and trying to get it so that people are able to have their input in each meeting. One of the things that our next co-chairs will see a lot is people will want to email and say, hey, can we put this in a meeting? Hey, and just navigating that was going to be essential for this community. I feel like as my piece of being a co-chair, I feel that confident that I have achieved what I set out to do, which was to try to get us more coalesced and more functioning and moving forward. When we first got together, we were all kind of sitting around going, what are we supposed to do? Right. And Lori and I have worked with Julia here to try to get it so that we had a clear path and that we were setting a standard to which we can operate and start moving forward. And so I'm feeling fairly confident that the next co-chairs will benefit from the path that Lori and I have so far blazed, and they can take what we've worked on and build off of that. So I'm really looking forward to the next set of co-chairs. So the next part is please let the co-chairs and Julia know that if you want to volunteer by August 1st, Lori and I will reach out to the interested folks. And please consider meeting schedule from September to November to ensure that you will be available. Next slide, please. Okay, and then our final order of committee business is to review the working agreements. The working agreements state as follow. In discussions, challenge ideas rather than individuals. Offer constructive suggestions. Approach different opinions with curiosity. Seek to understand. 3, keep the needs and concerns of the local community and the larger region at the forefront of the work. 4, arrive on time and prepared to the best of your ability. Let the group know if you are unable to attend a meeting. And with this little clause there, the co-chairs will aim to incorporate tools for breathers. 5, keep multitasking to a minimum. 6, keep focus on the objectives of the meetings. Utilize co-chairs to note additional topics for discussion by submitting topics in writing via email. Okay, and next slide, please. 7, honor the decisions of the group. 8, contribute to the overall success of the group by finding ways to participate that best meets your needs. 9, step up and step back. Collectively work to ensure that every member who wants to be heard is heard. 10, embrace conflict and work with your fellow committee members and staff to find ways to give each other feedback. The co-chairs will aim to incorporate various feedback tools. And of course, 11, use I statements. I will now pass it over to Julia to introduce public comment.
Fred has a question.
Oh, right.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to comment on both yours and Lori's leadership. It's been outstanding. I'm very grateful for the way you were able to bring us under control and direct us better. And kudos to Julia as well. And I would remind both you and Lori that I do not believe in our bylaws there are term limits for co-chairs.
Right. So, and this is how I'm feeling about this. I hope, Lori, if you would take a couple of minutes to have your say on this. I'm feeling that if the committee wants me to step down, I will. I'm participating in a democracy. But at the same time, if you guys say, hey, I think you and Lori should continue at least for the next one more term just to keep us going, I'm willing to do that as well.
So I'd like to say for my part that I hope that you and Lori will stay on. And whether or not you do, you've done a great job and really made a huge difference.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm looking at David, Lori, wherever you are.
She's here somewhere. Where are you at, Lori?
She's hiding.
You are a
I'm
little
here,
bit-
and
Nice.
I will add a comment. Can you hear me okay? I'd just like to comment that thank you for the feedback, and I have really enjoyed being in this position and I think it's a great opportunity for other people to take the to do this position. What I've enjoyed the most about it is the opportunity to have access to Julia and the rest of the transition staff to be able to shape agendas and to be able to interact with committee members both on and off of the meetings. And I think that it is, while I would consider staying on, I haven't, made a final decision, and I really encourage people to step up because it's a really good opportunity. And I believe that committees are even better by having diversity of leadership.
Way to put that, Laura. I agree with her. Yeah, if somebody steps up, I am more than willing to, get in this chair. Go, buddy, that kind of. And yeah, so,
Oh, back to me.
yep.
Yeah, so public comments. As always, community members were invited to sign up ahead of time. We didn't have anyone sign up ahead of time. However, Dwayne Judd, who's the co-chair of the Independent District Commission, was interested in being able to speak to you for a few minutes. He is going to join later though, so I'm hoping after our next agenda item, if he's here, we can come back to him. He's going to join virtually. And then I just want to take a moment, since we have some time on the agenda, to pause and see if there's any community members here in the room or virtual that would like an opportunity to provide verbal public comment. Give you a second to think about it. Come on up, Chris. What, you can come and sit in my chair
mine
so
for
folks can see you. Yeah. So we've had someone in the audience. Thank you, Chris. If you just want to share your name, and we give folks 3 minutes, and I might just ask you to wrap up if you're going on. But welcome. Thanks for being here. Appreciate
Actually
it.
been to another transition meeting in North last Thursday. And in fact, I had a question first before my comment. I'm wondering if there's a different set of co-chairs for each district. Is that how it works?
No,
I saw a
just
completely different group of people.
right. I wasn't here last week. I was away, and
This isn't the Independent District Commission. So you are at a public hearing for the Independent District
Right.
Commission. Their job is to establish the 4 geographic districts for the city. They've been having a series of public hearings. This is the Government Transition Advisory Committee, completely separate body that is here to advise city council, the chief administrative officer, people like me who work at the city on the transition, on all things kind of transition related.
Actually might be better because I attended the city council meeting today. And there was a lot of people who were.
Can you introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. I'm Chris Trevitt. I teach at Portland State. I live in Northwest Portland. So I consider myself living in a relatively privileged area. And last week I commented on the fact that I thought the committee was doing a great job of selecting districts or proportional representation that really addressed some of the problems that actually came up during the council meeting today. And but one of them that came up both last week at the transition meeting and this week at the city council was the idea that we needed to have approximately the same number of citizens in each district. And I believe I saw a range basically that was relatively small, between 160,000 and 165,000 or something like that. That sounds really good. But one of the things that was pointed out by Commissioner Gonzalez today was that somehow we already had diversity in government here in the Portland area and government bodies in general. And I just wanted to say that I felt that what we're discussing here isn't diversity. It's representation, and it's trying to achieve some sort of equitable situation, I think. And so one of the things that was brought up was that, like I said, we have even representation in terms of the number of people living in each district. But I would argue that, and the Maple map was probably the best representation of that in terms of it doesn't cut too far into the southeast, inner southeast or something like that. But I just don't feel that that should be the primary concern when we're trying to address historical issues, historical underrepresentation. Maybe we should be more concerned about the fact that the western part of the city has the money and the power, and that's part of the reason why we're even doing this. So I feel like we should be less concerned about whether we take part of the southeast portion of the city and have it be lumped in with west. And this, I think, speaks also to the part about diversity, because there was a lot of talk about that from Commissioner Gonzalez today, but there was no acknowledgement that maybe, for example, nobody in the council lives east
Chris,
of
I
205.
apologize. You're at 3 minutes. Can you just share your last couple of thoughts?
Yes, of course. Nobody lives east of I-205 from the city council. So I think that is something we should consider there as well. So thank you for letting me comment.
Thank you.
I'll pass your districting comments along to the Independent District Commission as well.
And do they have another hearing or two?
They don't have any more hearings. They're accepting comment until the 22nd. So folks still have an opportunity to comment on the district maps.
So thank you for the public comment. I want to bring up the slide deck again. So normally this is when I go over public comment to date and we look at sort of the data on public comments. I'm not going to do that tonight because we just met last week. And while we are having a lot of public comment because of the independent commission proposals that are out, I don't have really new reports to share with you at this time. So I'm going to turn it over to Maya Hayam, who's with the city attorney's office, to provide a training on kind of what it means to be a public official and public meetings law. And maybe I'll let her sort of introduce herself, and there is time for questions. We do want this to be somewhat interactive. So if you have questions about your experience thus far, kind of interactions you've had, please ask them. Maya.
Thank you, Julia. I'm happy to be here. I've been with the city for about 7 years now, and I've been working on charter reform since the Charter Commission was formed over 2 years ago now and defended the measure in court. And I also do a lot of training for public officials on ethics, and public meetings and public records. And that's what we're here to discuss tonight. And I understand that you have a really packed schedule, so I'm going to try to compress my training down even more so I can let you get back to that really important substantive work. But if you have questions that are specific or something comes up when I say something, please feel free to interrupt me. You don't have to wait until the end to ask your questions. I'm extremely interruptible. And the slides that I prepared should be in your materials. There's also some excellent links at the very last slide. So a lot of resources for you to go through. And Julia, is my screen shared at this point? It is the public official training. I'm just not seeing it. Okay. So again, definitely interrupt me because I'm having some computer issues. So we're here to talk about the.
I'm sorry, Maya, did you want to screen share? We're screen sharing your deck, but.
Oh, you are? Okay, that's fine. And then I should just tell you when to advance.
Correct.
Okay, great. If you could advance the screen, please. Okay, so this is really quickly the agenda. We're going to go through the definition of a public official, which is, spoiler alert, you guys are all public officials, and that's the point of the training tonight. We're going to talk about public meetings, and I know that one of your members, Joe Hertzberg, sent some email questions to Julia, and I'm going to weave those into the training. And then we're going to hit public records, and then really, really quickly, because I think it won't be so much of an issue for this particular committee, legal ethics. So moving right along, if you could advance that slide. So safeguarding the public trust is really what this training is about. So I'm a public official because I'm an employee of the city. You are public officials because you are a volunteer, an appointed board member. And it is really critical to safeguard that public trust. And you can see lots of examples in the federal government, state government, and local government where we don't always do a good job of that. And this training is really about making sure that we're all armed with the ability to bring our residents along with us as we're making these decisions so that they feel heard and represented. Next slide, please. So really quickly, who is a public official? Obviously, most easiest to identify are elected officials. They are the individuals who everyone immediately recognizes as elected officials, but you are as well. So you are all appointed officials to the GTAC. And by virtue of that appointment, you are also a public official with the same duties as the elected officials and for city employees. So I am a city employee, Julia is a city employee. So all of us need to comply with these rules and regulations, and then agents of the city. Next slide, please. Okay, so first and foremost, we're going to talk about the public meetings law. And I always like to talk first about the policy. What's the point behind the rules that we've established in code and statute? So the policy of the public meetings law is really that our form of government requires an informed public, and they need to be aware of three things. They need to be aware of the deliberations. So that's when you're talking amongst yourselves to figure out what you want to vote on and how you will vote. So everybody's bringing up their different opinions. Then the decisions themselves, the votes of governing bodies, and you are a governing body. And the third category is the one that people often forget, and that's the information upon which decisions are made. So it's not just the deliberations and the decisions themselves, but the information that's being gathered to inform the people who are making recommendations and who are making decisions. The public has a right to hear about the information as well. And there are three requirements to any public meeting, and if any one of these is missing, you are not in a public meeting. So the first is a quorum is required. So for this particular meeting tonight, it's a regular government meeting. And if we didn't have a quorum, then we wouldn't be able to meet, and we certainly wouldn't be able to make any decisions or votes. So that first requirement is met by this meeting tonight. The second requirement is to deliberate. So if there are any decisions that are being made, that is the second requirement tonight. And third, on any matter, and this is a little bit of a twist here, it has to be on any matter related to the reason that the body has been formed. And we'll go through a couple examples really quickly to just showcase which of the examples meet a public meeting, and if not, which of these factors is missing. So next slide, please. So all of these here are public meetings. All of these examples, these bullet points. So the first, a regularly scheduled meeting. Again, the meeting that you guys are having tonight is a regularly scheduled meeting, and the public meetings law applies. If you were to schedule an emergency meeting, that would also be a public meeting. If the full commission meets with the sole purpose to gather information, and remember I hit that point pretty hard just a couple minutes ago, to serve as the basis for a subsequent decision or recommendation, that is also a public meeting, and all of the requirements will need to be complied with. However, and this is a little bit of an exemption here, if the exclusive purpose of a subcommittee is to gather and report information to the full committee, the subcommittee meetings may not be public. And I put may not because it's probably not, but I'll work with Julia if this fact pattern comes up to make sure you guys are on the right side of the law. So if the subcommittee is merely gathering information, they're not deliberating, they're not discussing, they're not making any recommendations, it's just a purely informational gathering and then submitting that material to the full commission or committee, then that subcommittee meeting may not be a public meeting. However, if the subcommittee itself has authority to make recommendations or decisions, then any of their meetings would be required to comply with the public meeting. And then serial communications, and this starts to get to some of the questions that Joe had emailed Julia early. This is an emerging area of law, but it's one that is really a trap for the unwary. There is one case out of Eugene called the Handy decision. And in that decision, you had county commissioners who were emailing each other and hitting reply all. And they were really having substantive deliberations about the public's business. So they weren't saying, hey, do you want to meet for bowling on Friday? In which case you wouldn't have a quorum requirement, right? Like there's no quorum requirement for people going to a social event. So you can absolutely have social communications, but they were not doing that. They were having substantive deliberations by email. And it went all the way up to the Oregon Supreme Court. And the Oregon Supreme Court said, well, it is possible in using modern technology to really have a public meeting using reply all functions that circumnavigates the policy behind the Oregon Public Meetings Law. So if you've got public officials who are having substantive deliberations, discussions, and it's all happening via email, then the public is excluded from that conversation. They're excluded from potentially the information, the deliberations, and I would be surprised if there was a vote happening on email, because Julia would call me before the vote was finished. But you can certainly see how easy it is. We all reply all to emails. I'm assuming it's incredibly common. And so it's very hard to sort of instill in yourself this caution, because as a public official, if you're replying all to the full GTAC, you might have inadvertently violated the Oregon Public Meetings Law, because now the committee is having a substantive discussion about something that the public was not invited to. So that really, it's in bold, it's in all caps, really something to be aware of. It's a trap for the unwary. What I do personally, yes,
May I ask a question?
please. Fact pattern. So this training itself, if we weren't discussing anything that had to do with the GTAC, which I assume we will be later, that's usually what happens is people have questions that come out of their experience on the committee. But if we were to have a purely legal training where nobody asked a question based on their experience on the committee, then that would not necessarily be a public meeting, because no public business that the committee had been formed to discuss would be discussed at that training. It's very rare, so this has been noticed as a public meeting, so don't worry about that. But you're right, if there were a social event, if you were to say, gosh, I'd really like to have everybody over to my house for a barbecue so we can get to know each other better. I'd like to invite everybody. It has absolutely nothing to do with the public business of the committee. Then you could certainly send an email invitation to the entire committee. However, I don't recommend it. And the reason for that is it's so easy for people to hit reply all and then just sneak something. Hey, what'd you guys think about that council meeting today? Or, hey, I saw this Oregonian article that was talking about something I think we should bring up at the next meeting. So it's incredibly easy to violate that without meaning to. So my recommendation is always and this is tedious, and that's why you've got really good staff who can help you with this. But when you're sending those, you can blind copy people to make it harder for that reply all function, which again, it's just easy to violate the law in this way because of email. And Commissioner, is it Hyams?
Yes.
I was just gonna comment that I had the same problem happen with a group chat with one of my former city councils. With the texting, so beware of that.
Yes. In fact, if you will advance to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry.
One
that's
more
public.
hand, Maya.
Yeah, well, oh, there's another question. Commissioner Curl.
Yeah.
Forgive me if I have a hard name myself, so
You're right.
please tell me I got it wrong.
You had it right the first time. It's
right.
it's Zach Curl. You brought up a case or an example of like sharing a news article or something, raising information that would be maybe something that we would want to talk or add to the agenda for a future meeting. Is that, so you put the kind of exception with full commission meeting for the sole purpose of gathering information and reporting that information to the full committee. So, I mean, obviously there's the potential of it being responded to, but if there was just a declaration, for example, sharing the OPB story about Commissioner Gonzalez and Commissioner Ryan's plan, that as an email is not technically a public meeting. Is that correct? Or is it?
That is correct. And, but the problem is now what you don't control whether anybody else replies all with something substantive.
Right.
So you've sort of
At the mercy
made
of
it easy
everybody.
for somebody who hasn't been, who maybe wasn't able to attend this meeting tonight, or they just, you know, are so accustomed to hitting reply all. It's very automatic. I do it all the time in my work. Now you have triggered a non-compliant public meeting. So that's really if you're just saying, hey, can we put this on the agenda? I'd like to discuss it. Then that's really transitory and you haven't gotten into the substance of the information. But the second somebody does, then it's you've got a problem.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Santana. Oh, you're muted.
Anyway, yeah, I just want to ask because I did that. I submitted an email to the whole team informing them that I have requested an item to be added to the agenda. And in my email, I explained to them my reasons for requesting the item, why I was requesting that item to be placed in the agenda. Is that a violation?
It can, yes. If the second somebody responds substantively, then yes, it would be. And that's the problem, I think, is you really lose that control. What you can do is send that email to just the co-chairs.
There we go.
Because that's not a quorum. That's really, and that's the role of the co-chairs is to have those conversations about what should be on the agenda and what shouldn't. And the co-chairs then decide, and then what goes on the agenda, and you haven't involved the full committee.
Yeah, the email was sent out after the co-chairs. I sent it first to just the co-chairs and Julia. And then after they actually added the item to the agenda is when I felt that the committee needed to understand why I have requested that item to be placed in the agenda. So
I would, yeah, and I think that is problematic because unless the public has that email as well, they don't necessarily know why that agenda item has been added.
I see. Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Yes. Were there any other questions before I just want to move on to, okay, you've got a public meeting, now what? How do you comply with the public meetings law? Julia, are we on that slide with the requirements?
You will be.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, great. So if you've got a public meeting, what do you need to do? And you actually don't need to do anything because Julia is going to handle all of this for you. But just so you know, notice with an agenda needs to go out so that members of the public know what you will be discussing and can listen to that if they want to, or provide public comment if they want to. It must be held within the city of Portland at a non-discriminatory site. It must be accessible to persons with disabilities. The public must be permitted to attend. However, they do not necessarily have the legal right to public comment. Our public meetings law is a public attendance law, not a public comment law. Official actions must be taken by a public vote. The public is entitled to know how each of you has voted up or down. Unless there are minor issues of, is it okay for us to move forward? And having it recorded is sufficient for all of those purposes, including the minutes. So those are the requirements. Again, I just wanted to give those to you so you understood, but you don't have to worry about those. Julia does. So that's really the race through public meetings. And I just like to pause here for a second. Julia, can you advance the slide to the Dalai Lama and President Obama having a public meeting? They are in public and having, I'm sure, a lively chat, but I always just want to check in that that's sort of the public meetings portion of the training. Any additional questions? All right, great. We're gonna jump on to,
I'm
yes.
sorry. We do have one question.
Right, oh,
I
yes,
would like to ask a question.
please.
So I take that to mean that the only way that we all can communicate with one another is in this forum when we have a formal meeting. And the only discussion that we can have as a group is essentially at one of our meetings, which, of course, is a severe limitation.
Yeah.
Yes, you could. Now, forgive me, you have 13 members, is that correct?
15.
15. Okay. And have you defined a quorum in your working agreement, or is it a simple majority?
It's a simple majority.
Okay, so you could have, so you've got 15, so 7 of you, assuming do you have any subcommittees?
No.
Okay, so you don't have any subcommittees, so it's either you're meeting as the full GTAC or you're not meeting. So if you have less than a quorum, remember one of those 3 factors to having a public meeting is a quorum. So if you get together with less than half, so if you get together with 7 or fewer and discuss GTAC business, you will not have triggered a public meeting because that's not a quorum. Now, if members of the public see you and can visually identify that you're with the GTAC, that typically engenders distrust. So I don't recommend it, but I'm not convinced anybody would immediately look at 7 of you together and say, oh, that's one less of a quorum. That's the GTAC. They're doing something without public notice. But if you don't have a quorum, then you do not trigger a public meeting. And I've been saying commissioner, it's committee member, so I apologize. Committee member Kinsey. And you are muted, sir.
Sorry about that. A naive question. What do current city council members do? Do they get together in twos?
Yes, that's correct.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
anything more than 2 triggers a quorum.
Okay.
And so they're very careful, and we work with them to be, and they, before they come to office, they meet with somebody in my office, the city attorney's office, who is very clear that right now with our current form of government of 5, they can have conversations with one other person, one other counselor, but if a third joins them, you've got a quorum and that's a public meeting, unless they're exclusively talking about a Timbers game or something that's purely social. But again, that is one where if the public sees them, those are immediately identifiable as public officials. Hey, why am I looking at 3 of our counselors getting together and talking without the public being invited?
Thank you.
Yes. And committee member Neal.
Thank you. So I just wanted to follow up on Joe's inquiry. So to clarify that if 2 or 3 of us GTAC committee members were to collaborate with each other through email or phone conversation or at Starbucks. I'd prefer Stumptown, but that's, so to to formulate a request for an agenda item that we would then forward delegate one of us or all 2 to 3 of us to the co-chairs and Julia to be placed on the agenda. That's not it's not a public
No,
meeting.
because you have not formed any subcommittees, which is why I asked, because that would obviously, you'd have to be careful of triggering a subcommittee meeting if you had
Oh.
subcommittees, because that's a smaller quorum. But the GTAC does not have that. So you can meet 7 or fewer without triggering a quorum. So you have not triggered a public meeting.
Okay, then that raises another issue because we have had a couple of working groups, just ad hoc to talk about our outreach plan. And then we have, also the one for the listening session coming up in July with Jamie. But those are working with staff, developing agendas, brainstorming, and then coming back to the full committee with a plan. Those are not public meetings, working groups that are ad hoc, and is that correct?
I'd have to look and I can talk with Julia to confirm this. But if the subcommittee has authority to make recommendations, or if the working group has authority delegated by the GTAC to make recommendations, to go out and collect information and make a recommendation back to the full GTAC, then that would be what the law would call a subcommittee. And then you've got the quorum requirements of the subcommittee. Committee member Hertzberg.
So I want to get this clear because what you've said implies that if I wanted to get a message to the whole committee, I could take 3 at a time and send a message to 3 and the same message to 3 others, same message to 3 others, and there would never be a quorum there. But we would be deliberating. And I
Yes,
thought that was the essence of the Handy decision, was to prohibit serial deliberation.
Yes, and thank you, that's an excellent point. So if you break up your communications, if you say, I'm going to email these people and we're going to have a back and forth via email, and then I, as committee member Hertzberg, am going to take everything I've learned about where those members of the committee stand and what their positions are, and then communicate that to another subset of 3 or 4. And really, the law will say that's not, that's using technology to circumvent the rules. And what you've actually done is created a serial meeting where, it's like the game of telephone. And really the law is, if you're collecting information or if you're deliberating or if you're making a decision, the public has a right to participate and to understand how the decisions are being made. So that will be a violation. If it's like, all right, I'm going to go talk to, let me give you an example. If I wanted to brief the full council on an issue, I couldn't say, I'm going to go talk to Commissioner Mapps and Commissioner Rubio and brief them and solicit their opinions and positions, and then next go and brief Mapps and Mayor Wheeler, and then convey to them everything I learned in the room that I just left, because that's now relaying the thought patterns and the thought process, the deliberations of 2 more members of the council. And now we've got 4 members of council understanding and hearing their colleagues' positions on matters that are going to be coming before council.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disruptive, but we have a district commission co-chair here, and he only had till 6. He was only going to give us 6:55.
He's online.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm like looking over in the corner there.
Yeah.
I wanted to just give him the space that he needed, the time frame that he gave us to engage with us really quick. If that's possible.
I have a question that I think is important because what I'm listening to is that we may be doing something already that is kind of weird. So I want to make sure that I don't want to lose my job because I want to make sure that get this information correct.
Yes, please
I-
ask your question, then
Okay,
I'm
real
happy
quick.
to
Yeah,
pause
really
my
quick.
training.
Yeah, very quick. Right now, we're meeting like 3 or 4 or 5, whatever we want to volunteer to meet with some of the staff. And they present us what they're working on and they ask us for input. So we have usually a lot of discussion and brainstorming, and then we recommend things to them. And then the idea, and we were supposed to talk about this as a committee, because my concern was that when we do that, not the whole committee participates and they're not aware about what type of recommendations we're making in these smaller groups. And I feel like the whole committee should be aware of all of the things that are happening with the transition, not to partial groups of people doing separate work, but that somehow reporting back into the committee what is being recommended. Is that the fact that we want to report back to the committee, does that make those meetings public meetings?
Well,
We are discussing and making recommendations and gathering information, all of the above.
is it a working group or like that would be considered a subcommittee under the law that you've been delegated authority by the GTAC to go out and collect information, or are these kind of informal ad hoc
No,
groups?
we're not. Nobody's giving us any authorization because we volunteer and whoever volunteers goes.
So if it's just members, less than 7, seven or less, getting together to have informal conversations and then you haven't hit a quorum and you haven't triggered a public meeting, but I think you want to be careful about making sure that you bring those deliberations to the full committee.
Yes, okay. So bringing it back to the full committee doesn't make that or the other meeting a public meeting.
No, if you don't have a quorum, then you have not triggered a
Then
public.
as long as we bring the information back to the full committee.
Yes, and it sounds as if there hasn't been any delegated authority, so you could have these ad hoc conversations and not bring it back to the committee, but why would you? Right.
Exactly. Well, to me is that we work as a team.
Right.
And we all should be learning what is happening with the full transition. So that's
Yeah, and that's
thank
really
you
the
so-
policy behind the law.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That helps. Thank you so much.
Okay, guys, so I apologize to interrupting this training, but we only have this co-chair only gave us a certain amount of time and trying to give him proper amount of time, so we can continue this conversation after. Okay?
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So, and thank you for your invitation and to address the GTAC this evening. I do have a limited amount of time, and and it sounds like you guys are deep into a discussion around how to form yourself. So, I would hope that if there's an opportunity to come back and speak to a little bit more in depth, I'd greatly appreciate it. One of the things that has happened, I'm the co-chair for the Independent District Commission, and we are charged with defining the city's new 4 voting districts by September. And the charge for our work really is about engaging community and defining not just where to map geography, but how to map communities' relationships with one another. And that's been a huge challenge for us. There's been a lot of learnings that we've had in terms of how to improve the level of community engagement. And specifically when it comes to elevating voices that have been traditionally disenfranchised or unheard in the Portland community. We've had at this point 8 in-person engagements across the city, 2 in each one of the proposed districts. And we also had a virtual phone call with city members, community members. And so And in one particular one, we focused a lot on community engagement. And I think after that conversation, Joe decided, that it'd be a good opportunity for us to at least approach one another about the learnings and perhaps an opportunity to collaborate on community engagement as it goes forward. So let me stop there because I unfortunately I have I have several more community engagements this evening that I need to attend. But I just want to make sure that that introduction makes sense in terms of what this conversation was intended to be about. Any questions? Thoughts?
Dwayne, could you share your timeline? That is, my understanding is that you're going to be making a decision pretty soon. And, how can we help in that sort of short timeline?
Yeah. I think unfortunately, where we are right now is, as I said, we're on the backside of doing a lot of that community engagement lift. And so what we're trying to do now is focusing on the themes that came out and really in preparation as we get into August, the commission basically has to decide by September 1st on a final map and make that recommendation. We have 2 votes voting opportunities to get to a supermajority of 9. And we've been at this since February of this year with the majority of the work done between April and June, where the draft maps were produced. We did a lot of what you guys sounds like you're doing right now, which is to getting the ground rules set and understood by each one of the commissioners, and then working to build out draft maps, hearing from the public around what draft map contributions were the priorities for them. And then now, having submitted the draft maps to the community, getting that feedback. So we are, as I said, we're on the backside. I think we should not. Here's one of the things that is important to understand. Regardless of how these lines are drawn, there's still a high need for community mobilization, community engagement in this process. If you think about it, we're charged with defining these 4 districts, and that will allow for the representation of 3 persons per district. This is an opportunity to increase the level of diversity and the voices that are on City Council. Obviously, going from 5 to 12, it presents us with that opportunity. But it's not a guarantee that the more representatives we have, the greater the diversity. If the voting pool remains the same, you're going to get more of the same influence. You're just going to get more heads. And so really, in order to live out the spirit of what the Charter Committee recommended, it is about this work of having a more engaged populace that not only is making their priorities by community known, but also selecting and holding those elected representatives accountable, again, to the least of us, so that the majority of us ensure that we're benefiting. And so that's really the ongoing work. And this is where it's in some ways Joe and I were talking about this in terms that it extends far beyond what IDC's mission will be after September. And that's a huge opportunity, a huge lift to sort of mobilize communities so that they not only understand ranked choice voting, what that means for them in their communities, but they also understand the priorities that exist within their communities and extends across these areas of common interest. Sorry, Amy.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I attended 3 of the district committee meetings, and my key takeaway from those was whatever you guys do, please, for the love of God, pass a map. Whatever needs to happen in your organization to make that happen. That was just like my key takeaway, and I would just want to vocalize that. Please don't let it go to the council.
Yeah, that particular fail is low on the priority list. Thanks. Sorry, Amy?
Hi, I am curious now that you've been engaging with the different communities around Portland, if you see any significant differences in engagement strategies that have been more successful across the city, and any differences between areas of Portland where one engagement strategy would be more recommended for us in the future, yeah.
I mean, first of all, that is if we have the opportunity to come back again to do if I have opportunity to come back again, I want to bring some other parties with me, because that's a deep dive question that we want to make sure that we pass what we've learned on to GTAC, because there's a lot there. I'd say this for right now. You know, as I said, part of the strategies that has been common to, I think, Portland is the invitation to have communities come to them. That's problem one. We've been told several times that we need to go to where the community is, to literally be in the streets where these community members are. The least of us who have the least resources will not necessarily feel, one, comfortable doing a Zoom call, excuse me, or have the resources to participate in a Zoom call. And even if it's in person, how hard have we worked to remove the barriers so that you know, members of underserved communities, members who are economically disenfranchised or disempowered, have the capabilities to come to these in-person meetings, whether it's childcare, the honorarium, all these things. I think we've kind of missed in our understanding of what community engagement at that sort of most intense level really looks like. And so it feels like what we've unfortunately done is to replicate a process where we're just giving the most engaged groups and aggregating their thoughts. Does that make sense, Amy? And so, guys, I do have to run I have to run to an East Moreland community meeting. I thank you very much, and I look forward to the opportunity to come back and talk more specifically around the points that Amy just brought up, because that is, I think that's a vital, again, there's one thing that I wish that the IDC had, was more time to do this community engagement work correctly. We did what we could in the time that we had available, and the low resources that we have, but I think GTAC definitely has an opportunity to do this work, do this great work in a good way, and we'd love to share that feedback. Thank you very much, Joe. Again, thank you very much for inviting me into this. And Julie, please reach out if there's another opportunity to engage with the GTAC group. Thank you. Have a good evening.
And Julie, I just want to do a time check, because I know that you guys have a lot to discuss tonight. Do you want me to like race through public records and legal ethics? Or I could just be quiet. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, Maya. I was saying, we do have some guests after you. Thank you for your patience. Could you maybe hit the high notes?
Yeah.
5
Yeah,
minutes or
absolutely.
so. Thank you.
Can you advance the slide to public records? So the policy behind public records law is that every person has a right to inspect any non-exempt public records of a public body. Remember, you are a public body. So then the question is, well, what is a public record? And it's incredibly broad definition. Here it is. I've put it out for you. Any writing that contains information relating to the conduct of the public's business, prepared, owned, used, or retained by a public body, regardless of physical form or characteristics. Next slide, please. So here are examples, which is unusual because we just read it's a written document. And here are a bunch of things that aren't. So paper documents, easy, that's easy. Photographs, maps, emails, all of the emails that you're drafting, whether it's from your Portland, Oregon government email address or your personal account, if the email sent from your personal account relates to the public's business, the fact that it's on your personal account won't save it from not being a public record. It's definitely a law that says we're not interested in how you prepared it. We're interested in what it says. And I want to stop because I see committee member Gamero has a hand raised.
Yeah, if we have all the emails forwarded to our personal account, but we don't ever reply using that account, that doesn't kick in as public record, right?
Well, if it's, then what would happen if there's a public records request for your, like all emails that are, that have been received or sent by you, then we would have to go and get all of those forwards to your personal account. So my recommendation is don't do it. And what you can also do is CC Julia on every email so that there's a record from the city staffer. And then my office can prepare a declaration for you to sign that says, I've never, I forwarded emails to my personal account, but I've never sent any. And I've never seen a judge then say, nope, we're going without something else, without some reasonable suspicion. Like, oh, here's an email that you were trying to hide that the person you sent it to gave it to the newspaper. So it's obvious that that declaration you just signed is inaccurate. A judge is going to be okay with that. So, but it's a risk you're taking that you want to really keep that clean and CC Julie on everything and use your Portland, Oregon email address. Text messages are also a public record. Chats, I'm really happy that the intro to this meeting made that very clear. I think that's an important reminder because that's another one that we tend to do automatically and forget as a public official. Everything we write down that relates to the business of the GTAC is a public record, and voicemails until they're deleted. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so these will not be public records, transitory records. So these are typically things, emails or texts that say, hey, there are donuts in the break room, or I'm putting a large print job through, or yes, the meeting does start at 9. So those are transitory. You can delete those. Those do not have to be kept. Emails that are sent from your Portland address will also be exempt if it's exclusively personal. So for example, there will be times when I communicate with my co-parent about picking up the kids, that's exclusively personal. I would be able to have that excluded if someone were to make a public records request for my emails. And then there are always categories of information that are exempt from disclosure under the law, so we can redact those. I think it's really hard for me to think of a category that would cover your emails given the scope of authority of this particular committee. They would typically be things like business records that we require people to submit to the city, trade secrets, or if there's some personal privacy exemption, we would go ahead and redact that information. Next slide, please.
Maya?
Yes.
As a member of the committee, and I suspect this has happened to others too, people are expressing their opinions about every aspect of the transition to me. Some of those by emails to my personal email address. What do I do with those?
Well, if it's your best friend who you've known forever and they're complaining about Portland and how things are not on the right track, I think there's an argument that might not be related to the work you're doing as part of the GTAC. But it would require a look at the substance of those emails to say, okay, well, is this related to the GTAC's work? And if it is, it's a public record. So I think that's.
Should I forward those to my city email?
Absolutely.
And respond for my city email?
That I would, because you really, if someone makes a public records request for all of those emails, you want to be able to say, hey, I've never used my personal email account, or I've always forwarded or CC'd Julia so that we've got that in our archives. That's the best protection for yourself. So next slide, please. Yeah, so any other questions before we race on to legal ethics? Next slide, please. So the policy behind legal ethics, and we're not talking about anything other than ethics that are located in the statutes of Oregon. So we're not talking about a moral code or what's right or what's wrong. While that informs the statute, we really are talking exclusively here about requirements that are located in state code. And the policy is that we have to comply with different standards because we are public officials. And these are sort of the rules of the road. And we've been talking about them all along tonight about how do we comply. And the whole goal here is, again, safeguarding the public trust, that they feel like we're doing their work, not in secret, but out in sunshine, and everything is transparent. The compliance with the legal ethics is the personal responsibility of each public official. And I always put that up front because I can absolutely help you if you think you might have an issue with the legal ethics fact pattern. Talk to Julia, and then she and I will get together and work with you. You're not on your own. But once something's happened and you say, hey, Julia, last night, I think I might have made a mistake, then I cannot help you. That is your personal responsibility. So I can give you guidance before, but not after. Next slide, please. Okay, so and just very quickly, the Oregon Government Ethics Commission is the regulatory body responsible for maintaining records, and they receive the complaints. If somebody makes a complaint against you, their jurisdiction goes back 4 years, and there are possible sanctions, $5,000 civil penalty, or a forfeiture of 2 times the amount of any financial benefit you received. Most frequently, what you would get is a letter of reprimand, explanation, or education. So it's really a fairly flexible statutory scheme, especially if you're not willfully violating the law or you really should have known better. So if it's just a whoopsie, I didn't realize I made a mistake, you're almost always looking at a letter of education. Next slide, please. Okay, so who do you have to consider when you are trying to comply with legal ethics? And the first category is really easy. It's yourself. You are a public official, so you've got to be thinking about your own actions. But it doesn't stop there. The second category of people you must consider are your relatives. And I have a slide that I use. It's called the Thanksgiving rule. We'll talk about that in just a second. And then a business with whom you or a relative of yours is associated. Next slide, please. And then just back one. Okay, so this is the what I call the Thanksgiving rule. So rather than memorize all of these categories of individuals that you have to think about, I just say, close your eyes, imagine who's sitting around the Thanksgiving table. If they're there, you probably need to be considering them as well. Your spouse, your children, your siblings, your parents, any individual that you have a legal support obligation, ex-spouse. And if you are giving any of your benefits from your employment to somebody else, then you've got to be thinking about them too. So next slide, please. You also have to think about businesses with whom you're associated, and you've got this slide, so I'm not going to go into all the details. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's 3 categories of legal ethics that we're going to talk about tonight: use of position, gifts, and a conflict of interest. And all of these statutory areas have one thing in common, and they really care about money. And so legal ethics is really put in place so that public officials do not financially benefit from their public position other than your compensation, that there are going to be limits on you as a public official. So the first of those is use of position. And if you follow the news, this has been getting a lot of media print lately. Next slide, please. So the rule for use of position is that you may not use or attempt to use your official position to obtain a financial gain or avoid a financial detriment if the financial opportunity is not otherwise available to the public. And I'll just do the no violation Columbia Store Pass example. The city of Portland frequently gets Columbia, Nike, passes to the employee store If we were to get those because of our city employment, we would not be able to use those because we would only be able to get that decreased cost because of our city employment. But it's because these stores, they pass, I mean, I'm sure some of you get them as well. Like if you work for a large employer, these Columbia and Nike and Adidas just kind of like rotate through the large employers. So we get those passes not because of our city employment, but because we are employed at a large employer. So because that is a pass that is generally available to the public if you work for a large employer, that will not be a violation. Next slide, please. And let's just skip this one because this is for city employees who also can have outside employment. So next slide. Okay, gifts. I'm going to be really short on this one as well, because what you have in front of you is the rule for the state rule. You cannot accept gifts that are given to you because you're on the GTAC, if that gift is in excess of $50 from a single source that has a legislative or administrative interest in any decision you might be making. But the city of Portland actually has a more onerous, you can't accept any gifts of value whatsoever. So I'm not sure if anybody is trying to ply the GTAC with wine and cheese, but I'm very sorry. If you are, you cannot accept it. Next slide, please. And then there are exclusions, which we don't need to go into. Next slide. Okay, conflicts of interest. I'm going to talk a little bit about this. I actually don't think that you will ever have an actual conflict of interest. The most you'll have is a potential conflict of interest. But let's talk about what that means. So a public official is met with a conflict of interest. And remember that the legal statutes care about money. So we're not talking about an ethical conflict of interest, like a moral conflict of interest. We're talking about financial conflict of interest. When participating in an official action as a GTAC committee member could result in a financial benefit or detriment to you. And remember the Thanksgiving rule and businesses with which you're associated. So what does that mean? An action, a decision, or recommendation made in your official capacity, and my understanding is that you guys are delegated authority to make recommendations and not any binding decisions on the city. And if your recommendation were to cause a private financial benefit or detriment for the public official, then you would be met with a conflict of interest. Again, I struggle to think of a fact pattern that would give rise to this for you guys, but let's go through the exercise anyway. Next slide, please. Okay, so again, I think that because you guys are limited to recommendations, you really are just going to worry about the top right here. It's a potential conflict of interest. If the financial effect of an action is unknown because it might happen and it might not, again, that's a recommendation. If you're met with one of those, you must publicly announce your potential conflict of interest on each occasion before taking action. So you can vote and participate in deliberations. It's a potential conflict of interest. And the most easy way to think of this is I have a cousin who owns a carpet company, and I am sitting on the committee at the city who's going to decide who gets the contract to renovate the carpet in City Hall. I have a potential conflict of interest because I'm going to be making the recommendation on who gets that contract, and my cousin who owns a carpet company may apply for that. I would announce that potential conflict of interest, and then I would be able to take action. If my cousin then in fact submitted a bid and I sat on the committee to recommend it, I might have an actual conflict of interest. So that's, I think, the easiest fact pattern and why I really don't see anybody on the GTAC being in a position where they're met with a conflict of interest, whether it's potential or actual. But because you hear about this a lot, I really wanted you to understand what your obligations would be. And if anybody at any time thinks that they might have an issue here, reach out to Julia. She and I will work with you so that there's never any doubt and you never have any concern. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not even gonna ask for questions because that was really fast. Unless somebody does have a burning question, I'm happy to entertain it, but if not, next slide, please. Okay, so this is just resources and information. Again, this packet of slides is available to you. You've got it. I also have included links to the Attorney General's Public Records and Meetings Manual. It's a wonderful resource. It's fairly intuitive. There's a link to it right there. The Oregon Government Ethics Commission, I've given you a link there as well. And if you are really interested in following up on any more of these, they have great on-demand webinars, and you can call that phone number and get ask questions from their staff, and they can help you. So next slide, please. Okay, that's it. Thank you. I'm really appreciate your patience and for listening. And please don't forget that Julia and all the other staff are here to help. So if at any point, anything that I've said tonight sort of like causes you to think, oh, I might have an issue, please don't hesitate to reach out to Julia. We are here to help you. You are not alone in this really important work, and really appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thanks, Maya.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maya. I'd like to introduce the next agenda topic. So at last week's meeting, the committee learned that a person in the mayor's office had determined that the committee's scope of work would not include the overall architecture of the delivery of city government services or bureau program improvements. The committee voted to request that the person who made that decision attend our next meeting to explain the rationale for the exclusion. So tonight we have Haley Blonsley, the Senior Budget and Policy Advisor in Mayor Wheeler's office, as well as Mike Jordan, Chief Administrative Officer, with us tonight to talk about the role of the committee in this area.
Hi, folks. Is that my cue? Okay. Just wanted to check that there wasn't any more of a setup. Thank you for that. Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Blonsley, and I was working on just the very beginning stages of kind of getting charter reform rolling in the mayor's office before we brought on a person to focus on that work in the office. So I guess my first point of clarification is I know you wanted an individual, but there's not a lot of decisions in City Hall that work that way. So while I am part of the team in the mayor's office that helped to define the scope of your work alongside the charter transition team, we also consulted other council offices in that scope as well. And so there was some consensus there. And that is also, you know, how we went into selecting all of you to serve on this body. That was, though you are mayor appointees, we still consulted our colleagues in the other 4 offices to get you all appointed. And so I guess that's my first point that I wanted to just clarify. I'm sorry, I can't point you to one singular person that made the call, but I can help kind of represent the conversations that lent itself to that decision. And I did listen to the previous meeting, and I heard something about submitting a paper. I did not receive one, so I'm just going off of the question as Lori posed it. So I'll start there. In terms of, you know, how the scope was determined for this body, you know, we got the vote in November, and it was a clear want to create a community oversight body to ensure that the voter approved charter changes were going through as voters intended, and that there was going to be clear communication and education and engagement around those 3 pieces of that measure. In terms of, you know, that being the clear focus, I think the drive of that was that the community largely acknowledged that commissioners and the mayor were not largely supportive of various pieces of what the Charter Commission had recommended. And we wanted there to be comfort and reassurance in that a community group was reinforcing what was voted in, and that it wasn't just in the hands of the mayor and the commissioner to put those changes through effectively. And so that was really the heart of how we determined the scope for this body. We wanted there to be confidence in the fact that a community group was overseeing what a largely community supported measure was. So I'll start there, and if there's questions, maybe we can continue, but that's kind of the mindset that we were in when we were developing the scope, because we knew that the public didn't trust our offices, and that's fair in a lot of ways. And so we wanted to make sure that there was more confidence. But I'm happy to answer questions. I know there's a lot of different concerns on the table, so fire away. Hi, Fred. I hope it's okay. I'm calling everyone by their first names. I know it's
No, that's fine. Thank
more
you.
formal to say commissioner, but
Thank you so much. Fred Neal, he, they. You talked about the key components of the charter amendments. And in my estimation, I know you listened to probably me speaking to this at the last meeting, that one of the key components was to have a professional city administrator along with a administrative mayor. And that meant that there would be a consolidation of bureaus, if you will, under a single management rather than four commissioners and a mayor having their separate authority over the administration of those disparate and often siloed bureaus. And so that, to me, was a key component of the charter changes, and thus one key component that I had assumed when I volunteered to serve on this committee would be within the aegis of this committee, because as you point out, we aren't necessarily, the general public may not be trusting not just the electeds, but also those administrators who have had great autonomy over their individual bureaus to make those decisions without some community involvement, community members being informed, and maybe soliciting opinions from the general public, so that when that architecture of administration is reached, admittedly serially through the budget process in October, 18-month process that begins in October, through adoption of a budget for FY 24-25, that the public be fully informed of those decisions and how they were reached and what their impact is on the ability to serve the public.
so I really appreciate that comment. I think where I'll begin is, because you gave me a lot, so remind me if I don't hit a piece. I should have been taking notes on the side. Totally agreed that, part of the measure was getting a city administrator into play. And I think when we're viewing this ginormous process that we're working on, that is here's the new role and responsibility of the mayor, of the council, and then we're going to add in a city administrator to do the management piece of all of the bureaus. And so in determining those roles and responsibilities and that division of labor, I think there's a lot there for this body to discuss and dig in on with the public, because frankly, I know even internally, there's a lot of confusion and questions about who's working on what and when and why. What does come to council and what doesn't? As someone who creates council talking points and prep, I would love for so much of that to be handed off away from a mayor's office and into the hands of district elected officials. And so I think there's a lot to dig into there. In terms of what's been worked on in kind of the skeleton of the city, our perspective was, okay, so we've just had this big vote. We have all of these mandated changes that we have to make. And so now we have to kind of turn our heads to, how do we begin preparing for what that mandated change was, right? How do we even begin to think and I'm going to borrow CAO Jordan's phrase here, think with a enterprise-wide mindset, because I've worked at the city only 2 years, a little over at this point, and I didn't come from Oregon, and I had never seen a structure like this, and I was deeply confused when I started working here. And we were not even in a place to budget together, let alone be guided by a city administrator in 2025. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing, honestly, I don't want to, it sounds so much more diminished to say this, but it is team building. We are teaching the bureaus how to think beyond themselves, as leaders. We're teaching them how to budget together. As many of you probably know, in January of this year, the mayor reorganized all of the portfolios of the commissioners, just so that folks could begin meeting like with like, right? And that wasn't mandated by the voters. That was just us saying, this is likely the direction you're headed, so you better kind of get adjusted to each other and learn how to play ball. As someone who works primarily on the city budget process for our office, I was really grateful for that change, but it was a very difficult exercise to get people to put collective packages together. And I know even, I believe it was, I'm going to search here, Destiny last week, who said, you know, where we have to pay attention to bloat, to overlap, to duplication. Like that is happening on the simplest of levels, right? We're trying to answer questions right now of like, does every bureau need a communication team? Or is that something that a service area could just have and you can utilize that staff as needed? So I guess for us, in the way that council has been viewing these conversations, there is a massive amount of work for the mandated changes that have been put before us. I don't know if any of you caught the work session this morning, and a lot of confusion that we will need to clear up in the public about how those mandated changes are going to function within Portland for years to come. Off to the side, we see this as very high level catching up. And I know that Becky and Jamie kind of spoke to that last week, to just kind of prepare for the bigger changes to come where we do see a much greater community role and need for input. But to be honest, that's more of the service delivery and the side you're experiencing, unless do you need an executive administrative assistant and do you need an executive administrative assistant? And I think that we're still at that very high level of trying to team build and think as a group about what's best for the organization and best for the community, and also redirecting people's focuses to being service oriented, right? We exist as a public body for the community. But we have existed in a structure here for so long that it is so deeply rooted in us to be competitive because resources are limited and because, you know, traditionally you've had to fight through your commissioner to get noticed, to be recognized, to get staffing, to get any sort of programs up and running. Like we created all of these problems over decades. So I think that for us, these couple of months before we really hit the service delivery conversations is how do we refocus as a service delivery community oriented body and remind ourselves that we get nowhere by fighting each other and that does mean that change will have to happen and to be open to that change because there's so much possibility there. So I don't know if that hits where you were going, but I tried to touch on as much of what you asked as possible and I see a bunch more hands.
Thank you, Maya. And I'll let other people speak. Thank
I
you
think
very much.
Terry was next, but I lost track after.
Yes, Terry is next. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess all what you say is well and good, but we were appointed according to a city council resolution that says we're responsible for ensuring the implementation of the November 2022 voter approved charter amendments, that it's done effectively and efficiently, following the core values of anti-racism, equity, communication, collaboration, transparency, and fiscal responsibility. That's the resolution that was passed, and that's our charge. It just seems to me that, you know, we've seen presentations now a couple times on city organization with service delivery as a part of it. And if we're to do our job to advise on implementation, effectiveness, and efficiency, I don't see why we would be not invited to work on it. We don't have the benefit of your, you know, thinking. We have the resolution that we're supposed to answer to. And so that's my concern, that we have this charge. The charge seems to me would include service delivery through the deputy administrators, through the purpose of the new government.
I mean, I would
Am I
make
wrong
a
about
clarification that the scope is very focused on what was in the measure. And none of what we are doing was voted on by Portlanders. None of that was included as part of charter change. So
But
you
the
are
city
focused on
the city administrator was, and that is a fundamental part of the new government. So if we're just stopping at that one guy's office, or does that include deputy administrators and service areas? I would think if we're talking about efficiency and effectiveness, we have to talk about that we should.
And given the timeline and the size of this body and what it's been tasked with, that is why we wanted to hold so specifically to what is in your scope, which is what is mandated by charter, which does not include deputies, which does not include any sort of org charting, which does not include, and I think that there is a conversation to be had, once we get to the service delivery piece about how we're doing and getting recommendations and advisement on how we're doing public engagement around service delivery, because that is the part that is, most in need of public engagement and feedback. But given all that you are already tasked with, no, the scope would not be extended to include this and this and this, because this project is going to continue to evolve and grow. I mean, it already has since we began in December, right? It has already expanded considerably beyond just, the measure that was voted in. And we're trying to manage that work as best we can to make sure that we're being conscious of what we can accomplish now, what needs to be accomplished by a future council, a future mayor, a future city administrator in the next 1 to 3 years. And what is kind of maybe just a dream for consideration far down the road once we see some actual progress in the new structure and there's some stability there. So to answer your question, no, the original scope was to be specific to what was named in the charter changes.
Yeah, I'll just leave it at that. That seems counter to what the resolution says by its very words.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it's a different interpretation, then I guess that's what we're hearing from you, that it's a different interpretation.
And I'm sorry that that was not made
coming,
clear.
the authority is coming from where?
Yeah.
And do you need to pass a different resolution?
Yes.
Sorry, Juanita, did you want to go?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead,
let me-
I'd like to interrupt, sorry, as the co-chair, I'd just like to interrupt for a minute. So I just want to do a time check. We asked to have someone from the mayor's office come in and explain the rationale. And I think that Haley has done a good job of explaining the rationale. We may not agree with it, but she explained the rationale, and we have another agenda item, again, in our scope to advise, that I just want to be sensitive to
Yes.
spending time in this meeting, talking about the things that we've been asked to talk about, and
Yeah.
we did get the answer here. So unless you have something additional that I
Yes.
think
do.
adds to it, and you're sensitive to that we have these other
Yes.
topics.
Yes,
okay?
I do, because if the scope, the way Haley, and I understand where you're just the messenger, it's fine. I mean, there's nothing, but to me, you said that in the beginning that the only reason you had this committee is because you knew that the city knew that the public didn't trust them. So basically, we are being used as a tool to let people believe that, that we're having impact, having involved in the giving input into this transition. Now, if that's the case, then I agree with Terry. You need to do another resolution, because the resolution that is public and on the website of the city is very clear that it says that we have a responsibility to oversee the whole transition. It doesn't say only this piece and this piece. No, it says all of it. Talks about cost efficiency, staffing, organizational structure, going to have huge impact in the budget. Totally. So I don't want to be misrepresenting the city, misrepresenting my role in this committee, telling the public that we are supporting these things when we're not, because we're not participating in the whole overall transition. That's all I want to say. It's a very important point, because you, again, the city, there's given reasons for us to believe now too that we cannot trust the city, because we're being used.
And what I would respond to that is, in terms of the charter mandated change, you all do have a breadth of work to do there. None of what is being worked on as part of the city reorganization. And I think that goes to what Terry's point was about a difference in definition and how we're viewing what constitutes charter change. When as city workers, when we're talking about charter change, we are specifically talking about what is written in the charter and mandated by voters, which very specifically references the work of a city administrator. What we are trying to do and what I previously explained is all of the preparation work so that come January 2025, we are not in such a state of disarray that we cannot provide the basic services to our community, let alone the level of service that we would want to provide. And so in that regard, I do think Terry's correct that there was just a misunderstanding and a difference of definition. And I apologize that that was not clearly communicated. We did do our best to make sure that your recruitment materials and your onboarding were specific to that and responsive to your questions about that. But that is where this stands. And like I said, I'm happy to carry the feedback back that there should be a community body that can assist with engagement and advisement in terms of the service delivery work that's happening down the road in the future improvements process. But I will also flag that in creating that body, that is likely to be another recruitment because we did not include that in the scope for this body. And so there is likely to be a challenge about the fairness of adding to the scope, what we would see and define as adding to the scope of this body without opening up that opportunity to Portlanders more widely and making it clear that they would be working on service delivery and future improvements, which didn't appear in the recruitment or scope for you all. So I'm just highlighting the fact that happy to carry that feedback. Do agree that that is an important aspect of what we're going to be doing moving forward, but that would likely be a separate recruitment to make sure that people can apply for that experience, no different than you applied for GTAC. Lori, I don't want to take time from the next folks, so
Yeah.
I don't really know how to.
I know that
I see
Mike is
hands and
there.
I'm, yeah.
I know that Mike is there too. Is there anything additional, Mike, that you would like to add to this? And then I guess I ask the rest of the committee members who have questions to think about whether we want to continue this and we will forego the next agenda item if that's the case.
Yes.
It seems really critical.
Come on up.
Where's the hottest seat?
It's right here.
In what way?
Well, here. You need to be,
No, that's fine.
Can-
I'm-
can they see him on
Sit
the,
right- I can see it. Yeah.
they can see you as.
They, oh, yeah, can they see me? That's what they
the-
need to do,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Okay.
I've just now realized people are doubled up in the big room as well as on the small screens.
Yeah.
So maybe I will just go to the big room.
We've got
There we go.
everybody, everybody's looking at everybody right
Yeah.
now. So, well, thank you for a few moments. I know you've got other things to do, so I won't take a great amount of time. I think it's clear from what Haley has conveyed is that the intent of the mayor and the council was that this group advise on the aspects of the charter amendment that were clearly stated in the amendments themselves. And I also know that the focus of the group was, at least one of our intents was that you be the linkage to the community. And when we want to do community engagement, that you advise us on how we can do that the most effectively possible. And so I know that that was part of the scope for the recruitment and what Haley has conveyed. I think there is legitimate ambiguity and argument that the charter amendments creation of a city administrator is certainly a topic that has to do with how the city is managed. And I agree that that is an ambiguous interface between what Haley is describing as their intent in the creation of the scope for this committee and what I'm spending a lot of my time thinking about, and that is how can a first city administrator that the city's ever had be successful in the role. And so I can appreciate the tension between those things. I can't argue with what Haley has described. I think she's described accurately what the mayor and council's intent was. It would be disingenuous of me not to say that I'm spending a hell of a lot of my time thinking about how do we position a bureaucracy and organization so that it can be ready for a different form of government, where the legislative and executive branches are separated, where there is by definition a professional administrator that every employee, save the chief of police and the city attorney, report to. And so I guess I'm describing the reality of the situation. I'm not opining on where we go from here. So that's where we are. And I'm happy to try and answer questions if I can, or with the chair's indulgence, whatever you wish to do.
Amy?
Go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, Amy, do you have a question?
Amy Randall.
Yes, you were next.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. I just want to say that this feels like having an oversight committee that has no ability to do oversight in the machinations of the actual working of government. I agree with Juanita's statement about this being greenwashing or community washing, where meaningful oversight and community involvement by talented people needs to happen. And that's all I'll say. I'll leave the floor to these other folks that are going to make much more astute comments about it. But I really, really feel that this is greenwashing our committee's work.
Go ahead, Leah.
Thank you. Agree with what Amy said. Leah Benson here, she, they pronouns. Sorry, I'm going to take us off track for a moment and just note that we have 18 minutes left of our meeting. And to repeat some of the things that Haley said about the entire intent of this committee, which is to make sure that the will of the voters in the charter mandate from November 2022 is seen through in all of this. And I think it would be a real miss if this committee didn't have any conversation about what's happening at city council right now from city councilors Gonzalez and Ryan about the conversations. Again, going back to things that have been said before, it is our job to be taking in public input, listening to what people are saying. And that is a big conversation about charter reform right now. All of this is incredibly important, the conversation that we're having, but we don't have a meeting until August 14th again. If we can't have a conversation today about any of this, we don't get to be a part of this conversation. So I guess, David and Lori, if there's space to have a conversation about that today too, understanding we don't have much time, but I think it's crucial. I think as people think about our role on GTAC, this is it. Like, this is a conversation we need to have.
And just quickly, I'm happy to try and provide context as to what occurred this morning, but obviously can only speak as the, reaction and less of the folks that were doing the coordinating.
I think we need to have a conversation amongst ourselves.
Yeah, totally
Can
fair.
we extend this meeting?
Is that the ask, is that we extend this meeting? Is that not an article that we need to put to vote?
I think it is, and I think that's a privileged motion and, under Robert's rules. So, I'd like to move that we extend the adjournment time from 8 to 8:30.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, I guess we're extending this meeting to 8:30.
I would like to note, we will probably lose our interpreters who are here.
What about our?
Well, can you ask them if they can stay? The only
Yes, I will ask, but yeah, they're here for a certain period of time.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, since we're going to be continuing, people who may be needing the translation will need to hear, because this is a public meeting.
Oh, so to answer your question, Leah, we were going to save 10 minutes at the end to have a brief conversation, at least to introduce the topic about the working session today. So I've got Destiny, Bill, Joe, Juliet, and Juanita that still want to ask questions about the previous topic.
No, I put that just to say that I was voting in favor of the motion. Let me take it out.
Thanks, Juanita.
You're
Destiny?
welcome.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, David. Destiny Magaña Pablo, she, her. I wanted to reiterate what Leah just said and Amy just said. I think that it's imperative that we talk about our oversight, especially when city council, Counselor Gonzalez and Ryan don't even seem to understand what the charter was that passed, to measure it's going into full effect. And, being and there's a lot of community input there. There's a lot of professional input there. And for us to not even address things like which was brought up in the last meeting and previous meetings of like, how does council interact with servicing? How does council interact with the mayor? How does it interact with the city deputy administrator or the city administrator? Things like that. If the counselors are confused about it, and we have no, and they can't even implement the current measure that has been passed, they want to take it back to the ballot, shouldn't they come to GTAC as we are entrusted and have been given the entrustment to implement charter review, which was the ranked choice voting, voter education, that the city administrator be able to fulfill and work like Michael Jordan just said, show up to work and be able to run a system and service delivery. I don't see how we do not have a stake in that conversation, especially if it was because people don't trust city. And that was abundantly clear today. And that's it. Thank you.
Bill?
Guess first, I'd like to thank Joe for his motion. I think there's no more discussion, more important discussion to be had. I feel like the continued existence of this committee is up for grabs right now. And I don't care what else we have on the agenda. We have to talk this through. I think there's no ambiguity here. I'm really sorry, Haley, that you're being put in this position. The mayor should be here.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that Mike Jordan is being put in this position. You both are having to spin to us something that has changed since the start of this committee's work. And I have respect for both of you, and I'm sorry the mayor's not here to listen to this. There's no ambiguity. The city manager is a key part of this, and for us to not talk about that and everything related to that is crazy. And you come in and say, what does he say? You want us to build confidence in the community about what's going on by having us be your buffer, your shield? That's crazy. How can we build confidence when so much is off limits for our discussion? I mean, there is no confidence. You're undermining confidence by doing this. And you have to know that. And you have to take that back to the mayor. And there's no ambiguity. My application on this was very clear. My expertise, my experience is all about public management, about public organization. It's not about community engagement. I made very clear in my application the specific kinds of things I wanted to talk about, whether they were budgeting, or the role of city council people and how that was going to change, and how you had to look at how citizen complaints were going to be handled, or how policy discussions were going to be handled very differently than they are now. Your job for your citizens is to give them a sense of how they can be involved in public policy discussions going forward, and how their complaints will be handled in a situation in which city council people no longer manage bureaus. Right now, they can dig appropriately or not into the business of bureaus to try to get back and give a council an answer. What are they going to do without that bureau responsibility? No one's talking about that. And this kind of group would be an ideal place to have that discussion. Yet apparently that is off limits too. So what are we supposed to do? We're supposed to go out there and justify what's going on when we're not involved in what's going on or have any oversight in what's going on. And then you're going to tell me that that was the intention from the beginning? If that was the intention from the beginning, no one would put me on this committee.
No.
And you know that, and other people around here know that. So I don't want you to spin me in your responses. I would rather you just listen and take that back, because it's demeaning to you to have to do it. And I am angry because a lot of people's time has been wasted
A lot of staff time has been wasted. We keep talking about what wonderful staff work is going on. That's right, but they're being used too, because they're not being able to engage us in the kinds of things we want to engage with. I don't know what your advice or anybody's advice to me about why I should stay on this, but I'm not feeling it right now. And I want to hear the rest of this discussion to figure out why this committee should continue to exist, because I feel like we're just being used.
Let's, you guys, let's remember that we have a structure and that, I know this is a very hot topic and everybody's very passionate about this. But I'm going to limit, if there's no actual questions, I'm going to limit to 3 minutes for each piece of input. Just so that we are staying, structured. This is a public meeting. You understand what I'm saying? And that, we want us to be effective in our communication, not just going for it, if you will.
Sorry if you fear emotion, but this
Oh, no,
is a
absolutely.
very important topic.
Absolutely, Bill.
I'm feeling very emotional about.
You don't know.
If you want a question from me about that, I don't want an answer to this. Why was I put on this committee? And don't answer me, but that's my question.
Bill, that was not my intent to say that you were in the wrong. My intent was to say we just got to make sure to be mindful that we stay in structure. That's all.
Instruction.
Yeah, stay, within our, 3 minutes, just trying to stay in decorum and all that good stuff. That's all that I'm attempting here. But thank you for your share, Bill. Joe?
So we all were responding to 3 bullet points that I guess were in the council's resolution, but they were certainly in the solicitation for applications that we responded to. One of them is, I'm going to read them in reverse order, advise the city on the charter amendments, transition plan, and community engagement and education plan. We've done that. We've worked very closely with members of the transition team, and without fail, in every instance when I've worked with them, they have been professional, they have welcomed our involvement, and they have incorporated our input in their decisions. The second is maintain open and consistent communication and engagement with internal and external stakeholders. Throughout the transition, we recognize that we have an important engagement role, which in my mind has 2 parts. One is to assist in designing and executing authentic engagement in the community, but that's not possible for everything. And where it's not, I believe that we are stand-ins for the community. We're a group that I believe was chosen for the diversity of our experience, our perspectives, and our expertise. And I think that we have stood in for the full public in a number of instances, and I think that's an important role that we play. But the bullet point that Terry raised seems to say very clearly to me too, that our job is to ensure implementation of the charter amendments are done effectively and efficiently, following the city's core values. That seems to me to create an obligation on our part to make it very clear when we believe that something needs to be done and needs to be done by us. This is one instance. There are others have already come up, and there will be others. Now, I want to say very clearly, this is a committee, an advisory committee created by the city council. We're responsible to the city council, and if they tell us not to do something, then we're not going to do it. But we have an obligation, on the other hand, to make it very clear what we believe is necessary for the effective and efficient implementation of the charter amendments. And we would be shirking our responsibility if we didn't make that clear. And it's, the council's prerogative to tell us to back off. And at that point, we respond however we do, but we're not going to be a runaway committee.
Thank you, Joe. Next person on there looks like it's Juliet.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we have sent in this committee, I think we're all feeling and seeing this similar way, to me, this goes back to something I still don't fully understand, which is where all of our input goes. You know, doesn't really, matter by what medium it comes in. I don't have that straight in my head yet. So I think this is almost an inevitable outcome, that there's a difference of interpretation and there's a gray area. And as Joe pointed out, there already have been some. This is probably the most profound, and there will be more. And perhaps this is a hangover from the dysfunction of the previous charter. So I think what we need to be doing is deciding how we're going to handle these glitches or these oversights. And, staff has been so far out ahead of us in trying to figure all this out. They feel so much time pressure that they have been trying to get some things to gel just for us to chew on in this process. And probably this is a byproduct of that. So I think in the limited time we have, we need to decide, is there a parking lot for these gray areas? Do we want to pass a motion to advance to council? I would support something like that. I don't have wording in my head right now, but I think given our time and that this is probably not the last instance of this coming up, we need to talk about what our process is. Does that make sense? Thank you.
Really quick before I call on you, Jose, I want to read this it looks like a question here. It's for Mike Jordan and Haley. Notwithstanding any interpretation to limit GTAC to community engagement, if GTAC opted to inquire into city structure and services, would you guys make pertinent materials available to us? Is pretty much the question.
Yes.
Oh, Haley.
Sorry, Mike, were you talking?
No.
No, okay. I heard your voice. I would say, that is a question that I would need to bring back to council. That's not something that I can answer as one staff person to you all right now today. But I would say, I think what we would still need to tease out definitionally, and given the timeline that we're on already, and Mike can kind of speak more to that, is I think making pertinent materials available is an easy yes. I'm reading the second part. And giving credence to comments and advice. I think the part that I would tease out is the city structure versus that service delivery and future improvements conversation, because we're already very far down the road to Mike creating a recommendation. Sorry, so okay, thanks, Destiny. To Mike creating a recommendation, right, for council to ponder. And so I think that, yeah, I'm happy to bring that question back to council offices and get some feedback for you there. But I would want to still tease out and be really clear, knowing that we've had this definitional difference, what that would look like as part of your work plans and how we're considering that functioning moving forward. I would just want that to be clear on both sides so that we don't run into this again. And I do appreciate Juliet's comments of there's more of this to come, because this is new to all of us. And so I doubt this is the first time I will come in front of you and say, yep, that's the difference that we had and we misunderstood and you took it one way and we took it another. That's kind of part of this messy process. I did not know this was coming when I took this job. So here we are. They told me, here's your crazy structure. And then they said, just kidding, we're going to do it all differently and strap in. So Mike, did you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't know what I could add, Haley. And maybe, I'll speak for the staff. This is a very challenging place to be. You've already noted it, and I think accurately. It is clear that the mayor and council have a certain scope that they want this committee to work within. It is clear that we are working on how to make a city administrator a successful position within the new structure. I would consider it management malpractice if we weren't. So I think it would be appropriate for Haley to take this question back and be able to respond from council about how we could move forward in a way that's satisfactory to everybody. I appreciate the frustration. It is challenging to be put in a box with such an obvious topic outside the box that is right there to be discussed, and I understand. And so I await the answer from council also. And as staff, we are fully ready to engage on any topic that is okay.
And if I could ask to clarify the request that I bring, it would be really helpful to understand how you all envision that overlapping with your engagement and education work. Because I know what I heard in the last meeting was like, people are going to ask questions, right, about all of this, not just, you know, the very specific language of the charter. I know firsthand, you have a meeting about public safety and someone wants to talk to you about permitting and you're like, okay, we will go that direction for you. And so I would really appreciate if you all could put some language together about how that would be incorporated in a work plan. And just so that they have something tangible to chew on. Because what my fear is that I'm going to go back and they're going to give me whatever they're envisioning, once more, how we're envisioning versus what you're envisioning, and those things are going to clash. So I would appreciate it if I could get kind of some consensus by this body of like what that looks like and how that functions as part of your role as an education and engagement body, but also an advising body, right? And how we're balancing those things. So if I could get some language around that, I would be appreciative so that I can appropriately communicate your request. Unless we want to use what's in the chat.
Yeah, well, you know, I think
Yeah.
that the committee
Oh,
has very clear.
Juanita, could you please put your hand up and so we can give everybody?
Thank you.
Thank you. I
Thank
know,
you.
I know.
Apologize.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jose, you got 3 minutes, my man.
First, I just want to thank all the people that share their feelings on this. I too think it's really important. There's been a lot of talk. And I'm not picking on you, Haley or Mike. I know it's not you, just you, about the intent and the scope coming from the council and the mayor's office. And how certain things are not of the scope. But from the work session today, it seems even things that are in our scope are not in our scope. Because they're acting without us talking about things that are firmly in our scope, that are firmly charter amendment things, and they're having work sessions, putting up ballot measures without ever talking to us. So how can we then hear you say, well, you should only stick to your scope, but they're not even letting us stick to our scope. So it's just really hard to be like, oh, you should appreciate the intent. I feel like the intent at this point is just to have a body so they can say, well, look, we have citizens that approve of what we're doing without actually listening to us about anything, because they just went through a bunch of things that they're putting forward to the voters without asking, not even like asking us about it or telling us about it. We had to find out from the news that it was happening, and then we started talking about it and asking our staff members about it. So you say there's all the distrust at the, I don't think distrust is just outside this room. This distrust just starts in this room. And I think it's because of what they're doing. They say, well, this is what we want, but they don't act like they actually want us to advise. They want us to rubber stamp, which I don't think any of us here really want to do that. So I agree with Bill, like we should figure out what they actually want us to do and whether or not we all sign up for that.
Thank you, Jose. I'm assuming Fred, is your hand up or is that just?
It is. I was hoping to make a motion. But I'm working. So
Okay.
somebody else that wants. to talk.
Okay, go ahead, Destiny.
Thank you, Destiny Magaña Pablo. I want to ask questions from the transition team and from Mike Jordan. From today's work session, how is the implementation plan going? Because from the reports we've been getting, it shows that we're in the green, it's in progress. From this work session, how is it going now? What are you feeling as a team?
We feeling as a team. So I can't be exactly correct regarding timing, but I think the team heard about these things the same way you did in the media. And
Oh, that's-
we get rumblings, occasionally from across the street, but I think we knew something was up when you started to hear about it in media. So we heard about it around the same time. The different elements of what was talked about this morning present different questions to us as implementers. And so Julia is very well versed in some of the complications that get presented by these new questions. But I'll be at a very high level, be able to say that it presents us, should the council go through and actually put things on the ballot, then it presents us with a real timing question. And how do we effectively interact with the community when there's a question that won't be answered till November regarding educating the community, regarding engaging around which kind of ranked choice voting are we actually talking about? I'm not even aware of if there are technical complications over at Multnomah County about the software that when we passed our changes in our own election code back in March so that they could begin to implement software changes and thinking about how are they going to actually implement an election and administer an election with a certain kind of ranked choice voting. And now there's the possibility that the next November, there might be a different kind of ranked choice voting. And so is there a level of frustration? Yes. I don't think any of it is fatal. I think we can recover, but it is going to present complications for us on multiple fronts as we think about trying to implement the charter change. So I can't be any more
Can I continue?
frank than that.
So are there questions that you have for council right now that were directly related to the city administrator, directly related to council being separated, to the mayor, ranked choice voting? You clearly mentioned some of those. Are you communicating with city council regularly? Because it sounds like this work session, you heard it when we heard it.
Yes, I think regarding the issues that were the subject of this morning's work session, we quite frankly had not been communicating, in more than a regular kind of check-in basis because we were on a track to implement what had been passed in November and actually hadn't heard of any change in direction until late last week. So we weren't doing anything out of the ordinary, just regular check-ins with council offices and chiefs of staff and those kinds of things. Now, you mentioned a couple of other things like the city administrator and how it relates, as we talked a minute ago, about organizational structure and where do we go with all of that. We have been communicating regularly, and there are conversations going on regularly between council offices and the leadership of the bureaus that they are overseeing right now. We have intentionally set up conversations so that they can talk about how do we move forward, and we are framing questions for them to chew on so that we can get feedback and think about how does this organization look going forward. And then, of course, even if you had a vision for what it was supposed to be in 2025, you have to figure out how to get there through a budget process that has to be done in the next year and organizational changes that require, I don't even want to start the ad nauseum amount of technical changes that have to happen in HR systems and budget systems and finance systems to make a change like this.
Right.
So have we been talking about it? You're damn right, we have. And we just can't afford not to. As I mentioned before, I think it's literally management malpractice to not be talking about.
And then I have a couple more questions, right? 3 minutes is just for personal statements. Okay. So from these questions that were brought up from the work session today, right? There was things about budgeting. Are we fiscally responsible? The proposal to 8, from moving 12 to 8, things like this. This work session, doesn't it so distress or potentially ruin the implementation of the measure that was passed by people?
Could I take the first swing at that, Mike?
Sure, go ahead, Haley.
So, and I wanted to reaffirm what Mike said. We were tipped off that this work session was being requested last week. We were not given a firm agenda for what was going to be said or offered at the work session until I didn't see anything until this morning, and the work session began at 9:30, which, as you can imagine, makes it very hard to prep your commissioner or your mayor for something that they're walking into blind. And I think you all, if you haven't already, will see what that planning and release of information did to the session. To your question, Destiny, about kind of just like the damage, right, that this does to the process. I mean, our office has expressed, right, the commissioners are within their bounds to put work sessions on the table. They are within their bounds to try to take something to council as a resolution, to put it on the ballot, as Mike explained. What we are doing as offices behind the scenes and also at the work session is saying, you know, conversation is conversation. And what the mayor said this morning is the voters already told us what they want, and we need to do right by that and implement. And we're sure we're going to be making corrections for a very long time. Like, no one's doubting that. There's going to be tons of tweaks and adjustments needed. But I think what you're hearing play out is discord, right, among the commissioners to say, you know, we're comfortable to either move forward with what's been voted in already and implement and uphold, you know, what we've promised voters we're going to do. And there are folks that are saying, well, if we can perfect it or tweak it or whatever it is beforehand, then shouldn't we do that? And that's really the argument that they're holding on. So it has been filed as resolutions by Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Gonzalez. Those 3 items, because they proposed 3 changes, will come, they're slated to come to council next Wednesday as resolutions. And so from there, that is how you're going to see, you know, how this all plays out. So they are within their bounds to do what they're doing, but I do agree that it is not helpful, but it's also been hard to kind of loop you all in or to kind of stop the train that is in an underground tunnel, is my best analogy. And so it peeked its head out today.
If I could be specific to your question, I think it regarded budget, and there was questions today about the cost of implementation and how was that going. While there are legitimate questions about implementation costs, I think we will end up well within the estimate that CBO gave for the initial implementation costs. The ongoing costs are really speculative based on staffing plans.
Yeah.
And we haven't gotten to a staffing plan yet. We're due to give that to council by October when we give an organizational recommendation. That staffing plan will both be about council staff and how would we recommend council be staffed? And the organizational structure will have staffing changes. And so we are going to have to incorporate that also into a recommendation. Those things will have implications mostly for a 24-25 budget and beyond. But just the implementation, I think we're going to be within the one-time range. We're going to be really close, even with the capital issues in City Hall. So that's where I think we are.
One last question. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say, Mike and Haley, do you think this, you know, the council opened this as this is a discussion, this is a conversation. Would you find it well within our right to continue implementation process to invite them to the table to have a conversation here with GTAC as overseers of this at all? To make it easier for you?
I think
So
it's.
I saw you all listed as people that were invited to the work. I saw Amy's face. That was my face too. Amy Randall. We had the same facial expression. I saw just GTAC members on the list of folks that were referenced and by, I don't know, because we're just seeing like a broad. So that was just a document that I saw.
And I'll just say, Haley, as an advisory committee to city council, I think it's well within your rights to ask city council to come talk to you.
And I think that they, I mean, at least had some notion to, and maybe there wasn't good follow through there. So that's a good way to kind of root that, you know, invite.
Okay.
Go ahead, Fred.
Right. I'm trying to bring something on the tables that we can vote on or at least discuss, decide whether we're going to vote on it or not. That isn't confrontational, that does not involve us in a political discussion that is going on now with the council now and next week and whatever they decide, whether they have a third vote or not. I don't think that what they decide is something that we need to address, but I don't know that we need to try to change their minds. So what I'd like us to do is move that GTAC requests the mayor and council include GTAC, inform GTAC and make us able to deliberate and recommend on the reorganization of the city's administration under a professional city administrator. This information should include and interchange should include next what's their name? Next Strategies change management process and the progress towards defining service areas and future improvements.
So my question to that would be, even if we vote on that, bring that, and we all agree on that, will mayor and city council be legally bound to it?
No, it's we just make recommendations. I think we all have, and I've been pondering this since we were told that it was none of our business. Do I want to stay on the committee? I think we could, those of us that don't feel that we want to be shills, that we can't convey to the public information that we're not privy to, that this is a pointless waste of time. I would, let me clarify, because I don't know that you've all have seen, maybe I requested it from Shoshana, I'm not sure, the statement of work for the Next Strategies, the change management program. Under this contract, consultant will provide strategic advice, thought, partnership, planning, research, assessments, analysis, change management, and implementation products, and participate directly in processes to design and implement changes in partnership with internal project team members. The core objectives within the scope of work will be to transition how city bureaus are administratively managed to align with and prepare for city administrator oversight and improve service delivery to Portlanders and ensure that structure provides that the city administrator has what they need to do their job, including the authority that matches responsibility. And to me, that's where we need to be, I think, brought to the table to some extent, not directly involved. We're not in that team. We're a separate entity. We have a role to play that we have not been given directly, Haley, but that we understood was a responsibility of ours. And to that, that's my motion.
So could you just, before we vote on this, could you just clarify the motion, exactly what your motion is?
Right. GTAC requests the mayor and council include GTAC, inform GTAC of, and make GTAC able to deliberate and recommend on the reorganization of the city's administration under professional city administrator. This information should include the progress towards change management and defining service areas and future improvements.
Can I make a comment on that? I thought that change management, we were asked to be engaged in change management. That is part of our scope. So perhaps we eliminate that from your motion.
But if you look at the scope of work, Lori, of change or Next Strategies, it is exactly that, I think, of how they're working with these team leaders, the bureau directors, folks that Mike's trying to butt heads with or bring them together on. I believe that's being facilitated by Next Strategies. And
but isn't that facilitating the change, not necessarily creating the org structure there?
Oh, well, I don't know that. I guess we can respond to the progress reports we get from Next Strategies and from Mike and his team on the getting there. For instance, the 5 service areas, the council adopted this resolution for the transition in February to give each, to reassign bureau assignments to each of the 5 of them, and to along lines of maybe these are good service areas. They were given specific tasks and were told to report back in 90 days. And so when we first met, I kept asking Shoshona and then Barry Pack also, when's that going to happen? Your 90 days is up in May, and then it didn't happen. Then I was told that the reports were going to be this meeting that happened 2 weeks ago at the council when Mike and the team and the city auditor's office, et cetera, reported, and Lori, you and Dave represented GTAC. There wasn't anything mentioned about any of these substantive issues raised by the resolution or progress towards effectuating them. And that still means that we're in a void of understanding how the city can coalesce around more appropriate service areas and more effective and cost-effective service delivery in a transparent way. That's where I'm concerned most about, is transparency. You don't want another committee on top of us, I think. Just look at the budget of your deliberations from October. You need to entail us, I think.
Okay, so Fred, just because we only have like 8 minutes left.
All right.
So you're,
Can I move that we extend again? I mean, this is really critical stuff. And I, for one, am prepared to stay here as long as we need to. So I'd like to move.
so my question is, are we gonna, on top of, which is fine with me, but my next question is, are we gonna keep Mike and Haley? I don't think we,
Only if they want to.
okay. And how about you, Haley? How you feeling?
I do have a hard stop at 8:30, sorry.
Okay, okay. All right, well, you made that motion, and so is there a second?
What is the
I
motion?
think it needs, well, help me here. So it is another half hour, 9? Seems to me we ought to go till 9, and if we get close to 9 and we're not done, I'll rise up again to say 9:30, but for now, 9 o'clock. I move that we extend the adjournment until 9 o'clock.
Second.
Second. All those in favor? All those opposed? Looks like the majority wins and we're extending to 9.
I didn't hear a second to my motion, so.
Okay, so I just, before I call it out, can you just, one more time, just tell us exactly what the motion is, just.
I repeated it twice.
Yes, yes, you have. It just made
a
a simple block around it. That's what I just want to clarify.
Let me clarify the motion.
Yeah.
And that is that we be the body
Yeah.
to consult, be informed of and consult with the city administration and council.
Okay.
On the transition to a professional administration, including how the bureaus are coalesced or de-siloed and budgeted for.
Okay, thank you, Fred. I apologize. That was mostly for my clarification.
And I put in future improvements because we all recognize that it's a hard push to get to January 2025 with a professional administrator that knows what they can and can't do under whatever structure is, I think, incorporated in the 24-25 budget. And what they may recommend for future improvements. That's where I think we also can play a role, because our term, should we remain on this committee, extends until March 2025, where we can talk about, okay, you got this far. Good job, Mike. Good job, team. Good job, current council. Bye-bye. Here's what we think you need to do further with future improvements, and hear from the Mike and his team, because they're certainly thinking of that. Well, maybe this isn't something we need to do right now, but wouldn't it be nice if we could? And so that's, I think we have a role.
Okay, so I was just informed.
Second first.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't hear a second.
Yeah, let's say, does anybody second this?
May not be what they
We
want.
need a second to comment on the motion, right?
Yes.
Okay. Does anyone want a second?
Sorry, I need to be real vocal on yeses and nos, so you track this.
Right.
I'll still second.
Is there a second for Fred's?
I'll second because I have a question about it. Mike, would that help you? Like with things going on right now, do you think it would be great for us to get clarity from city council for your transition team to implement the measure?
Yes,
Okay, so then that's clear.
clarity will help.
Okay. So I second it.
I have one question before, I really, not for you, Mike, thank you, though, thank you. For us to consider with it, based on what Mike said, though, in that we can say we want whatever we want from them, but whether or not they give it, I think is the question. So I'm wondering if the motion as it's worded in terms of us requesting from them is really what we need, or instead if we need to be more precise in terms of, to something that Zach has brought up, actually documenting what we want, like sending them a formal letter to say, this is what we're upset about and this is what we need. I will be honest, I don't trust that if we make a motion to say that we would like information, that they're going to provide it to us. So I would be comfortable with this, but I would prefer that we say, we are documenting it in writing, we are putting it out there, we are saying we will come to them, and tell them in person any of these, but I don't think it's going to be fruitful if we ask for it.
And I'd like to support Leah's comments and just say, Fred, I'm totally supportive of obviously what you're asking for, but there's a lot of things that aren't in there about roles of city manager and council, about citizen engagement at that point, about the budgeting process, about how to make the council into a policymaking body. I mean, I think we could take time and be much more specific.
We can't formulate, you want to formulate it tonight?
No, we can't do that tonight.
Sorry, can I interject? I just, again, we're kind of giving preference to people who are physically present.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
folks
thank
who
you.
are virtual have their hands
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
again, if you want to speak and you're in the room, just raise your hand and one of our co-chairs will call on you in the order. that
Jane,
your
you've been
hands are.
waiting very patiently, and I really appreciate that. I really do, Jane. Please.
Point of order though.
Well, thank you very much, and this is exciting conversation, but and we can write this any way that we like, but I think we have to be extremely real that as of next week, this thing can be completely derailed. And that's what's frustrating me most about this process, is that we know that there are important things that have to take place, and we're kind of like pushing on within a preset agenda. We're filling out forms to go to community meetings or to talk to people, when essentially there is a big challenge afoot here. And if we are the community representatives, we're not being asked our opinion about what might happen about that. Because this wonderful new form of government is being challenged in the media, and everybody who supported it, I think I had 50 emails today with people who, after they saw the OPB thing, saying, oh, well, okay, well, how much this is, and do you really think we do need 12 people? Couldn't we do 8 people, or what have you? So really and truly, we can write this up and we can ask, but next week, there is a huge chance that this thing is delayed. And my understanding when I met with Julia was, if we don't make the election in November of 2025, then it's another 4 years. And so we're going to 4 years. So this is what I would really like to do. Maybe you remember that I asked Shoshana at the beginning, how dangerous are our present commissioners to this process? Who's the opposition? Where is the opposition? And it was kind of like not assumed that there was any opposition. We have huge opposition. And quite honestly, the media is helping feed the community opposition right this very moment. So I do think that, I would like to offer Haley and Mike our help in this. Let's have a strategy for next week where we all show up, whatever that is. And we need to really, really work on it. I think that it is very dangerous what happened today? And the questions were, the questions of city council were the questions that the community is asking. So internally, the city team has not done a good job of educating the city council either. Because people have said, well, gosh, excuse me, I think maybe I have said, could we have a job description for the new council members? What are they going to do? How are they going to spend their time? So I think that what we're seeing is questions that the community at large has, but it's in a very, very dangerous setting. So I'm just putting that out here because I don't know how the hell Haley and Mike is going to wrangle this for next week and what they're going to bring to the meeting, which all of the media is going to cover, but it better be a better performance than it was today. And I would like us to be able to help in any way, shape or form, because no matter how much we're pissed off with whether or not we can get to play in internal reorganization, I'll be really, really pissed off if this goes off the rails. Really pissed off. So my 2 cents, and thank you so much.
Order, David.
Yes.
Because we started a new motion, shouldn't we start a new speakers list to talk about the motion? Because now we're jumping.
Yeah.
We'll jump back to something else.
Yeah.
I think
Sorry
we need
about
to,
that.
Yeah, that was me. I was trying to
I think we need to close out.
those in the web land to be able to feel included into this conversation. So that was my fault.
Someone maybe should take that stack and then ask everyone to lower their hand and raise their hand if they want to talk about the motion. And then we'll go back.
Good, good.
Did, sorry.
Everyone.
Well, now everyone put their hands down.
There we go.
So the discussion topic is the motion that Fred has put forward is what's happening here. And it looks like Terry, looks like you're first.
You see how I jumped the line there? That was awesome. That was an awesome. No, I put the stuff in the chat and I thought that maybe I should just speak to it. I think where we're at, Fred's idea here is exactly right. But I think all we need to do is write the letter, assert that we have this jurisdiction over this area under the plain language of the resolution. This is our interpretation, and this is where we're at. If they think otherwise, they will let us know otherwise. But it's time to document where our committee is, and with a vote of the committee, which I'm not on yet, but there's maybe vacancies soon. I think with that vote, we'll carry some weight, and people will take it seriously, and we'll solve this problem. But just asserting where we're at, I think will be really helpful to everybody.
Go ahead, Amy. You hear me?
Yeah. Can you use the last name? Because there's 2 Amy's on the committee.
I'm sorry, yes.
Sorry, I just.
Go ahead, Randall.
I just wanted to agree with Leah's statement about the jurisdiction of our committee and whether we can send that letter, but really being realistic about what's going to happen. And the immediate concern here is letting the council know that the sheer disrespect of that proposal in this working session, and the fact that they didn't that didn't offer me comfort that GTAC was on the outreach list, but we never received outreach. That's severe governmental dysfunction. That's not like a cute thing to leave off. That's like misadministering your very, very basic task. So I just wanted to, as far as the motion, say I'll be voting against the motion because of the broadness, not for any lack of support for the general content of it, but I would support some sort of subsequent motion or further motion about doing what we can, either a letter directly to Commissioner Gonzalez and and Dan Ryan, Commissioner Ryan.
Mixing things up. Mixing things up.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
speaking on the wrong measure right now. Yeah, sorry. So I'm
Yeah.
I'm against this measure and I support a further more specific amendment of it, iteration of it.
Okay, not sure where to go from there, but yeah, we're just talking about Fred's measure at this point. Joe?
So Fred's measure was
motion.
informally, and there hasn't been a formal amendment, but it was
Right.
informally amended by Leah. And I think that most of us who've spoken agree that it needs to be broadened to a clear statement of what we believe our scope is. We believe that scope is plainly stated in the council's resolution. And we'd like to know whether that's our job or whether we're expected to do something else, such as focus on education and engagement and speak when spoken to. So the two new bullets are a little bit different from the three old bullets. We're not going to be able to draft. It's not just drafting, it's crafting a letter. And I think we heard from Maya that we can't deliberate outside of a meeting. So if we're going to do this, we're going to have to meet again. Somebody, which means something like a small work group, is going to have to craft that letter and bring it back to us. I would totally support doing that because we've all signed up for another year and a half. And, you know, I want to make sure that I know what I've signed up for. And tonight it's changed pretty dramatically.
That sounds like to me.
And I want to say that what Amy Randall, Amy, do you pronounce it Randall or Rendell?
Randall.
Randall. That what she said is right. There's a whole nother issue that that's on the table when this is done.
So I'm going to call on Lori. I'm not sure why you have your hand up, Lori.
I just wanted to, I support what Joe said of creating something offline and having the committee meet again, at least get a quorum together to meet. I know that there was a lot of trouble scheduling anything between now and then, but perhaps there's enough of us to create a quorum. The second thing I wanted to say in crafting that is to Juliet's point of that this is just the beginning of the things that may or may not be included or excluded. And perhaps we should actually broaden the way that we write it. And it should be anything that is associated with efficient and effective implementation of the charter reform. And you could put in perhaps the example of what's currently excluded. But anyway, again, that could be crafted offline. And so I agree with Joe to do that.
So, yes.
So I will withdraw my motion in favor of if I have a second agreement with my seconder. Thank you, Betsy. And defer to Joe's suggestion for a working group that will deal with the issue before us, not the one that the council discussed yesterday or today. Today. They may not have a third vote come next week. Let's deal with our current situation and what our lack of respect we have from the council in regards to the transition that is underway currently. And so I would defer to Dave and Lori to enlist volunteers and designate them to that.
If, first of all, I believe we need to vote on whether or not to have a working group, right? Okay. So are you?
So moved that we form a working group to craft a letter to the council for our discussion this evening.
Second. Can I request that we put a date on that?
Yeah, well, and that we meet again as a committee, at least with a quorum, as soon as possible after that request, that letter has been crafted, so that we can vote on it. They can, the working group can report to us and we can vote on it.
Okay, so there was a request for a working group to draft a letter to mayor's office and city council concerning what our concerns tonight. I believe, Destiny, you were gonna second that.
Second.
You second that, okay, Jose, you second that with the addendum that you guys put a date on it tonight?
Just put a date on it because this is very timely, so I don't want to work.
Okay.
Weeks.
All right,
I would also add that we could share the letter publicly or something to that effect. This isn't something that we're privately trying to share. This is something that we want to share in a
We'll
very
vote on it in a public meeting.
media with this is well within our scope to
Be a
share
public meeting.
something like this. And then
would be a public.
Can we vote on it?
Who is that?
Okay, so there has been a motion, there has been a second. Does anybody else have anything else to say before we vote on
Well,
this?
I'll accept a motion, I will accept an amendment to the motion for a time certain, a deadline per Jose's request. But I just sort of said as soon as possible, because I don't know what people's schedules
I think it
are.
ought to be as soon after next Wednesday as possible because things could change on Wednesday.
That's true.
I appreciate it. I was just gonna ask Mike, would anybody on you or your transition team be interested in going to that work group, helping us craft a letter to assert our jurisdiction that would help your team implement this measure?
Well, thank you.
Okay. I just wanted to ask.
It sounded like Michael volunteered there, guys.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Okay, so so there's been a motion, a second. All in favor? Well, hold on, it sounds like I'm skipping a,
The rest of the comments that we have in this.
yes, okay.
Substitute motion.
If folks have questions regarding this, please leave your hand up. If you have not questions regarding this, leave your hand down.
Go ahead, Juanita.
No, I'm putting my hand down.
Oh, okay, okay.
Thank you for clearing the stack.
Yeah.
No,
Thank you for the help, yeah.
cabinet.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so before I call this for vote, is there anything else? Okay, so all in favor of this work committee? 1, 2, 3, do we need to do this by name?
Can you raise your Zoom hand?
Yeah, we're raising some
We
hand.
need to pick that up because I need to document notes that who is voting yes in this. So please leave your hand up until I call your first name. Apologies. Unless you're an Amy, then I will also say your last name. Thank you. Great, this is for folks who are in favor of the work group. Thank you. I have Amy Randall. Thank you, Leah Benson. Thank you. I have Jose. Thank you. I have Destiny. Thank you. Juanita. Thank you. Zach. Thank you. Amy Wood. Thank you. Lori. Thank you. Abby. Thank you. Brad. Thank you. Amy. Thank you. All right, people are going, my screen's getting weird. Juliet. Thank you. Bill. Thank you. Jane. Thank you. And Fred, I believe I already have you.
Okay.
Am I missing anyone?
You give me, I didn't hear my name. I didn't.
Joe.
I'm pretty sure she's,
Adding Joe to the list. Is there anyone else where I have not called your name and you'd like me to score this measure? Make sure that I have the notes correct.
did you get Manny?
I do have Jane, I do have Manny. Thank you.
Yeah, and I vote in favor as well.
And David.
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, it's hard to track on Zoom. Appreciations.
And Amy Wood, are you voting? Is that why your hand's up in favor of?
Amy, what I have your support.
After the vote, I wanted the chance to chat. It's just been hard with this virtual attendance to get myself in the queue here.
Okay, I got you. Okay. So all those opposed? Okay. I think that's passed. So with that being passed, I would honestly suggest, given the time, that we figure out a date. I don't know, I know that we just heard all the stuff about email and all that, but something, unless you guys want to do that, because that can be pretty tricky to do that right now.
Not now.
Yeah, so I would suggest that we figure out maybe What do you think, Juliet? Maybe tomorrow you can send out like a doodle poll or something, or?
I'll take volunteers first and then.
Yeah,
doodle.
okay, so sounds like we'll take volunteers and then we'll do a poll on what time, what date would be best. Is everybody in agreement with that? Okay.
And let's make sure that we don't have more than 7 volunteers.
No, it will be a public meeting because this work
All right.
has been empowered to make a recommended letter to the full group.
Okay, good, very good.
And what was you, yeah, where'd you go? Amy, you still there?
Yes, hi, I'm still
Okay,
here.
there you are. Yeah, you're, okay, I see you now.
Okay, thank you. It is a little hard to contribute virtually and get your hand in there. So I'm glad we voted on that, and I want to make a quick comment here. It's somewhat repetitive as to, I think, the themes that I'm hearing from other people, which is that with GTAC, absent some singular mission or objective of our group, besides this topic we just voted on, we are looking for a chance to prove that we are bringing value to the implementation and that we are able to have influence over the things that are going to matter, the details, the granular details in implementation. And the timeline was racing ahead of us. So I just think that we GTAC actually has influence. So it's very frustrating, and I can see why this particular area is of importance. But beyond that, we can't be the body here who just serves as the voice to the public, but like consultant contracts are already being signed. Software contracts are probably already being signed. And it just feels like we are constantly racing to catch up and then have an input and then have a say in all of this. So, and then separately, I wanted to say, when I read of the proposed tweaks and changes from Commissioners Gonzalez and Ryan, I did submit a letter because I want to say that I'm not on this commission, and this may be an unpopular opinion here, but I'm not on this commission because I believe every single aspect of the charter reforms are already perfect. So I just want to make sure that I'm really clear here. My mission on being on this committee is to not just say I wholeheartedly will be, showing up, to endorse every single aspect of the charter reform. I'm here to make sure it's implemented smart and efficient and wise, and that where there are final tweaks to be made, that we weigh in, because not everything has been thought through. So.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate that. Fred?
Yeah, I'd like to point out, kind of repeat what Amy said. In my personal regards, I volunteered for this, even though I had great misgivings about some aspects of the charter. An experimental ranked choice voting system. 3 people in 4 districts thinking that that's going to be more representative, when in fact it's maybe would have been better with 12 districts, so that there was somebody you could talk to instead of trying to talk to 3 different people who may not like each other or agree with each other or agree with you as a constituent. And representing 165,000 people can't be any easier than representing 56,000 people. Moreover, I thought that the mayor's position as not being able to sit on the council or at least veto measures made him a mute, if not a mutant mayor, putting him or her in an ambiguous situation with a professional administrator, et cetera. But the voters spoke. And so my goal is to make sure that the city delivers on the successful transition to the new charter. Now, I did not sit in on the work session this morning. So I'm not quite sure what the the two commissioners have in mind. I'm not sure that they will be successful in effectuating their agenda next week. If they are, then I think we need to adjust, as will the city administration, as will Multnomah County elections. In regards to putting a measure on the ballot this November, in which case then I will take I hold my personal prerogative to take First Amendment political statements, take out another voter's pamphlet as I did in the original charter with other colleagues, contribute to a campaign for or against whatever is on the ballot. And I think that's a prerogative each of us has as individuals, regardless of our position as members of GTAC.
So it's now 10 to 9, and I'm not going to move that we extend the meeting because I feel pretty done. But if anybody wants to keep going, now is the time to make that motion.
Yeah, can I go next?
Yes,
Yeah.
Juanita, I just wanted to make sure nobody has a motion to extend our meeting.
Well, no, well,
Okay. Go ahead, Juanita.
the concern I have is that we need to redirect, because I think that we talk about the need to meet to make sure that we have up when after to review the letter or to get the letter to the committee and vote. So we need to, I think it's important that we don't leave tonight without having a date for that meeting. And Julia, that would be a question for you. Can you facilitate getting a meeting just for this item and the agenda? A public meeting?
I have not had a lot of success trying to find meeting dates live in a meeting with 20 people. Highly recommend we do that offline.
In person? Okay, okay, thank you. So then we can just agree, as long as we have a quorum, we can meet in person. Okay. So I guess that's my recommendation. I want to know, what do we go from here? Do we make a motion to do that? Do we need a motion to do that, David?
I think we do.
We already did
I don't think we.
Done.
with the work group.
Yeah, with the-
No, but that's a work group, but then that has to, didn't we say that that needed to come back to the whole committee?
Yes. I thought that was a motion.
Yeah, we've already taken care of it, Juanita.
Okay, perfect, thank you. And what is the date for that meeting? When
You
we
decide.
bring back, the work group brings it back.
We'll have to find a date offline. To be determined.
How soon? We need,
Juanita, I can't, we don't even know when the work group is going to meet, when they're going to be done, when you can all get together. And then we have notice requirements for both the work group and the full public meeting.
yeah.
And this is a very hard time of the year to schedule you all. I will do my best to do it as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I thought I hear before during the conversations that, and maybe I misunderstood, and if I did, I apologize, that we wanted to do this before the meeting of the city council on Wednesday.
No.
No? It's fine. Like I said, if I misunderstood, then I just will close my mic.
Thank you for your input, Juanita. Okay, and looks like we have one, Leah?
I'll take my hand down so that
Okay.
I can do volunteers for the work group.
Okay,
Oh, we can do that offline.
yeah, we could,
I thought we were gonna do that while here. I'm sorry, it's getting late.
yeah, exactly.
It is.
Everybody's getting tired. Yeah, that,
You know what?
we agreed to do that part.
I can say something anytime.
I
I'll
I
put my
thought that
hand
this
down.
part was, I thought that this part was, we were now talking about the current work session, the work session that happened today. And was anyone going to make a motion about anything that they wanted to make happen because of that? And then we would deliberate. I know we only have 5 minutes, but otherwise that's tabled.
Right.
That's a conversation I'd like to have, but I'd like to table it because I don't think we actually have time in 5 minutes
I think we're running out of steam.
to get anything
Okay,
done.
I just wanted to clarify. Thanks, Leah.
Amy?
It's on the website. That's
Yeah, I would just say that I will be writing a letter myself as one person to the commissioners that put this forward. And I would say that just we each have the individual ability to do that. to kind of vocalize our dissatisfaction with the fact we were completely left out of a decision crucial to our committee's existence. Or, weren't even informed. There was no collegiality. There was no playing by any kind of respectful rules there. So just wanted to say that I will be doing that privately and personally, and invite others to do so as well.
Thank you. Lori?
Yeah, can I clarify? I know, so Julia brought to David and my attention before the meeting about the media guidelines. And one of the things that it says in there is that when we speak, even though we may say we're speaking on our own behalf, it is interpreted as we're speaking for the committee. And that's not advised. Maybe we need some clarification on that. I know that we're now talking about doing it and we have done it. I don't know, Julia, if you have any further clarification on that, or we can just resend out the guidelines, but that's what the guidelines say.
Yeah, I'm happy to send them back out, though they're all in our shared folder. And they're referred to in our bylaws. So again, I think we are all individual people, right? We wear many hats in our lives. I do as well. I'm a public official right now, but when we leave, I'm back to being Julia as a person, and my speech is not infringed. We just want to be clear that when GTAC as a whole committee hasn't voted on a certain decision or recommendation, then clarifying that you're speaking as an individual versus a GTAC member, that implies that there could have been a GTAC decision. Same like for me, I'm a city transition team member, but if that team doesn't have a certain decision about something, I'm just speaking as Julia. And it's important, kind of going back to some of Maya's training earlier, to just, it's about public trust, it's about transparency. So if you have any questions, I'll send out the guidelines again or take a look again. If you have questions, let me know, I'm here to help. We just want to be, not cause confusion in community.
So then can we clarify? It sounds like per what Amy was just talking about wanting to do. That sounds like that's something that should come from the committee.
Yes.
As GTAC saying that we felt like we were not included. If Amy wants to talk about something, she shouldn't talk about GTAC. She should just talk about how she feels about what the council is talking about.
Myself as a political professional.
But not mentioning GTAC being not included. Okay, I only want clarification for myself too. Thank you.
Yeah, and I really believe that a leader like that should actually come from GTAC too, for the whole committee.
Thank you, Juanita.
I want to speak to this very specific thing, which is I was pretty nervous about that. And I even wrote a note to the co-chairs asking for more guidance. What I've been doing is feeling perfectly free to describe what's been said in GTAC meetings, which are public and I believe recorded and available to the public. And, that I'm not speaking on behalf of GTAC saying we've made a decision, but I have been able to describe our discussions and pretty much say everything I wanted to say that way.
That's my point. You can pull up our meetings all the way back from meeting 1. So, yeah. And then Dusty.
Just a question,
Yeah.
in case the work group does not come back with a letter in time for the next council work session, I don't know the date, we would be okay as individuals going in there and testifying before city council, just in case us as a group, like because I'm supporting the implementation, right? And so if the GTAC doesn't have the letter, as a citizen and a voter can go in and address city council because it is timely.
But I think you should not mention GTAC.
No, exactly,
Yeah.
as an individual.
Right.
Yeah.
As an individual, not as a.
Yes, that's what I'm saying,
member
as
of-
an individual, because I do want to make sure that I go as an individual.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, got like 30 seconds left, guys.
Question, should we let you know if we're interested in serving on this group?
Yeah, I'll just send you an email tomorrow and let me know if you want to, I mean, you can also just email me right now and I'll see it, but yeah, I'll send out an email tomorrow, kind of reminding folks about what it is and what the timeline might be, and then take volunteers. Absolutely.
Wait, I think we need to resolve something because Terry just put something in the chat that I think it's contrary to what we just said. So let's be really clear. Terry said, as a GTAC member, but speaking personally only for myself, my interpretation of what
No.
Julia said, what the guidelines said, is don't mention that you're a GTAC member. You
Just a
are speaking for
disclosure.
yourself.
You have to
period.
disclose your affiliations.
So you have to disclose your affiliation, but
You have the ability to disclose your affiliations.
yeah. Okay.
You have the ability to expose patients. Well,
I would think, oh my gosh, I would think that if you're going as an individual, you disclose that you're an individual, not
right.
working under GTAC. Yeah, thank you.
I guess I propose we get official feedback on what's the right thing to do here, because the guidelines are a little bit unclear there.
I will send him out again, and then if folks have questions, please let me know, let the co-chairs know, and we will get you responses.
We're gonna go ahead and close this now. I'm sure everybody's feeling like the steam is out of the room, so I'm gonna quickly just read through this real quick. The recording of this meeting will be posted on the committee's website. As a reminder, let the co-chairs and Julia know by August 1st if you're interested in serving as a co-chair from September to November. Based on committee members' availability, we don't meet again for almost a month, okay? So that'll be Monday, August the 14th. We encourage folks to do a few things before our next full committee meeting. For committee engagement, identify one group to engage this quarter and sign up to go with another member on their identified engagement. Attend the trainer session to present on the transition. And for city hosted engagement, attend the July 27th community information session on city organization and future improvements, and/or attend the August 8th community listening session on code 3.02. What I'm going to say, we have a proposed upcoming schedule, which I'm sure we can just which is at the next meeting, we have two primary agenda items. We will receive a training on what, okay, I think we already did all this. I'm gonna go ahead and say the meeting adjourned. Sorry, guys.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for hosting.